To tonight's school committee meeting. This is the first meeting to kick off the 2015-16 school year. I'd like to welcome everybody. I would especially like to welcome Mark Rombacher, who's on my left. Mark is a new member. He was appointed earlier this summer to take Chuck DeCoe's place. Chuck won an election for selectman and moved from the school committee to the Board of Selectmen. And Mark was appointed, it was a joint appointment by the school committee and the Board of Selectmen to fill out the term, which ends this coming spring. It's a Mark's seat is the only seat that will be, the people's seat that Mark is currently sitting in is the only seat that's up this spring, but Mark will fill that seat until that's over. Welcome, Mark. Mark has been involved on a volunteer basis in the schools before, but I'll let you talk a little bit about that and introduce yourself.
Yeah, Mark Rambacher. I was on the Pursuit of Excellence Committee for the school. I'm on the library board. I have one kid left in the school, one that just graduated. So.
Excellent. Great. And now that you're here, I'm going to ask you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to take care of the consent agenda. We have minutes from June 25th, 2015 and August 20th, 2015, and we have oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on any of the minutes or the oath to bill and payroll? Hearing none, I'll move the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. I jumped around and we did the introduction to the new school committee member. Interested citizens. Are there any interested citizens that would like to come up to the podium? Just introduce yourselves. We just need to know what street you live on and who you are and bring up your issue. If you have handouts, you can just drop them right here and we'll pass them on. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kelly Davis.
And I'm Morgan Mayo. We are reaching out as past middle schoolers concerning the dress code and wanting to create a district-wide solution.
We believe that the middle school dress code is sexist against girls, focused on a single body type, and worded too specifically.
From the middle school dress code, we found this quote: "If a girl wears a tank top, no spaghetti straps, halter tops, tube tops, strapless tops, or racerbacks." Clearly, the wording here is directed towards girls. It applies to only girls wearing tank tops, not boys.
Most of these examples are things that girls wear in modern culture. In the Indian culture, women wear saris that exposes the stomach and lower back area. The men don't sexualize them, and it has been worn for many generations.
Also, from the middle school dress code, we found this statement: "Dresses and skirts should be worn of appropriate length. The hemline must reach at least the student's fingertip of the longest finger." There are many different body types on men and women.
A BuzzFeed article called "This is what one size fits all" actually looks like on all body types, shows women with different body types wearing the same clothes. A girl with long arms is going to need to wear longer shorts to follow the current dress code at the middle school, whereas a girl with short arms can get away with almost any length.
Again, this quote is also from the middle school dress code. Clothing that is distracting or which may disrupt the learning environment. Distracting means to cause someone or to stop thinking about or paying attention to someone or something, and to think about to pay attention to someone or something else instead. No part of the definition is a sexual reference.
The current dress code violates our rights in the 14th Amendment. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This protects our right to choose any hair, length, and style, clothing, or other aspects of our appearance.
We propose that there should be one dress code for the entire school district. Clothing should not impose a threat to one's health or damage school property. Also, clothing should not have words, symbols, or Schcmtes that knowingly incite or defame one's heritage, sexual orientation, class, gender, and religion. We have looked at several schools and districts to create the dress code.
Acton-Boxborough Regional District School Dress Code states that the school cannot interfere with their right by punishing you or restricting you from any school activities because of your appearance unless there is an overriding legitimate school purpose. These instances include safety hazards to one's health and school property, offensive slang terms that insult one's rights.
Chelmsford Public Schools state that All students attending schools may wish to dress, groom themselves appropriately. The wording here isn't sexist or too specific. They also state that any clothing, jewelry, etc. that denotes drugs, weapons, sex, gambling, alcohol, or gangs is not allowed in school.
Ayr Shirley Regional High School states that students are required to dress in a manner that reflects pride and respect from themselves, the school, and their community. This takes into account that students should still be able to express themselves while following the rules.
We sent out a survey to gather students' opinions and thoughts on the Littleton Middle School dress code. 78% said they didn't agree with the dress code's wording.
70% said that they had to buy clothes specifically to be worn at school.
72% said that they feel more comfortable in clothes that don't follow the dress code.
When Dr. Branco confronted the 8th grade girls about the dress code, 40% felt attacked and targeted, 45% felt uncomfortable, and 65% said that they feel that the school places more importance on what they wear than their education.
Our proposed district-wide dress code is that students should never expose the 5 Bs: buttocks, bellies, breasts, bare backs, or boxers. Clothes, jewelry, etc. that reference drugs, weapons, sexual intercourse, gambling, alcohol, gangs, or any illegal activities are not allowed. Students should dress in a way that reflects their pride in themselves, their students, and community. Clothes that are a threat to safety or school property is not allowed. Any article of clothing that has obscenities, words, or symbols that incite or defame rights of others such as class, gender, sexual orientation, heritage, and race, and religion.
Thank you for considering our proposal. Kelly Davis.
And Morgan Mayo.
Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
We'll talk about this, but just before we do that, let's just frame it a little bit in terms of the current situation we have relative to dress codes. The school committee has a policy, JICA, student dress code, that's up online. You can take a look at it. It's very general, and it really isn't a dress code in terms of it doesn't specify what is or isn't allowed. None of the things we talked about any clothing, doesn't have any message about not wearing clothes that promote drugs or alcohol or anything like that. It's very general. And it does talk about the students' rights in a general term, and it talks about in general terms that the decision as to what constitutes disorder, disruption, rests with the individual building administration. Then, on top of or below the school committee policy, which is very general, we have student handbooks, one for each school. In each school's handbook, there is a dress code. They are different, maybe by design, maybe not. Each school council works on the handbook. We do approve the handbooks, but ultimately the work is done by the school councils. So one of the things you guys talked about was not doing it that way, is having a one very specific policy at the school committee level. And right now, that's not what we do, and we do it on a more general basis. So that's kind of the framework we're coming off of. We're all in agreement on that. Does anybody have anything in response? Daryl, why don't you start? You've done most of the work on the policy stuff for us in the past several years.
Yeah, no, like you mentioned, our policy is modeled after the MESC guidelines that they provide as a baseline for all schools to use for developing their policies. And I think over the years we found that having certain issues handled at the school level where, we don't have, we have 4 different schools, 4 different age groups, 4 different sets of things that happen at the different development stages there. And I think that's worked well for us there. Even if we were to consider a policy change, we would probably push it back down to the schools to make sure that the input is gathered not just from a small subset, but across the entire community, and then work through each of the school buildings to make sure that it's consistent with the objectives at each of the principals level there. Before we would bring it up to this level, before we start having a public hearing about the process for the change there. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to say you need to work with each of the building principals to see what needs to be adopted within their handbooks for that, and then if there's a roadblock in terms of the principals being obstinate about hearing the input, that's something that we would clearly elevate through the superintendent to make sure that we had a good process. And if that process was failing, we would probably have to step in as the school committee at that point there. But in looking at sort of the issues around dress codes there, it can be a very polarizing activity too, as I see in certain communities that want to adopt uniforms for all of the schools, and because they believe that would be the best educational environment. It's just an area that I think working it from the school level up is sort of where I'm still at with the policies.
Okay. Mark, any comments or thoughts?
I agree with what Daryl said, that it should be handled more at the school level and escalated as needed. I think they did a nice job gathering their facts and putting it together. The one comment I would have, though, is I don't think this violates your constitutional rights. If you actually look, you don't have the right to say whatever you want and wear whatever you want in the real world, right? Your proposal is very good, but it's not a constitutional issue. Right? You'll
Actually,
learn that
the
more
Act
in
in
government.
Foxborough states that it is constitutional, and it goes back to Tinker versus 1969. There was a Supreme Court ruling on it.
Okay.
Alex?
Yeah. First, just since we're talking about the Constitution, I think they were speaking about the 14th and not the First Amendment, which is still something to be debated. But 14th is discrimination on the basis of sex, whereas the first is freedom of expression. Firstly, thank you so much for bringing this up. This is something that I think we read about a lot in the news or online, or that I have at least over the past couple of years. I think we definitely want to get it right, and I know that this dress code has existed long before Dr. Branco's time at the middle school, and it's just one of those things. We have so many policies that are very old, and we'll look at them, and it's good to every now and again decide, okay, maybe it's time to revisit this in a more serious way. If we were going to build this from the ground up, what would it look like? And that way we can get away from this dress code is sexist or it's not, and start from the ground up and say, if we had a blank slate, how would we do it differently? Would we do it differently? I agree that generally the process is we start at the school level. Generally, these policies are made in the student handbooks, which are the responsibility of the principal and the school council, and then we as the school committee approve those those student handbooks. And so that's generally the process. That being said, it sounds like there are students who aren't feeling satisfied with the current policy, and so I'm sure there is some way we can get both parties together to work out what a different policy might look like. So instead of saying, oh, our policy is better than yours, getting everyone to come together and work on a solution that makes everyone satisfied. I just have a question about the survey you did. I think it's fantastic that you went out and asked folks for their opinion. Do you know roughly how many students you spoke to? Were these middle school students, high school students?
We sent out a survey online that was linked to the school email, and about 300 students.
300 students replied.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How many students go to the middle school? Just
350.
Just about 350. Wow. Nice sample size there. So these numbers then, I think, do speak to a need to revisit the policy and have a serious look. I don't think that this is the best place to debate that, obviously, but perhaps a group working with a subset of the school council, but that also includes certainly the two of you and probably also some students at the middle school, might be an effective way to take this outside the school committee meeting level, where it's very, we're on this side of the table, everyone else is on that side of the table, get everyone together, work on a policy until folks are satisfied, and then bring it back. I also just want to point out, and then I swear I will finish.
That's fine.
State law says that, Chapter 71, Section 83, it says that school officials shall not abridge the rights of students as to personal dress and appearance, except if such officials determine that such personal dress and appearance violate reasonable standards of health, safety, and cleanliness. And someone in the audience referenced the Tinker v. Des Moines case, which actually has a. You'll have to correct me here. I'm gonna
I will.
throw something out.
He's hoping he'll have to, but he's not sure
we
yet.
have our in-house lawyer here, so hopefully he'll keep me in line. The Tinker case actually has a lower standard than a more local case in Massachusetts. I'm not going to remember the exact date, but I believe it was 1993, Pyle v. South Hadley, Pyle, and that was a case where a couple of students came to school with jokes about drugs, not saying, go out and buy drugs, but just jokes about drugs that some people found offensive, and the school administration made them change. And the student's father, who happened to be a constitutional law professor, sued and won in the Supreme Judicial Court because the court found that the case didn't prove that they were distracting is not disruptive. Thank you. Disruptive was the term they used, and the material on the shirt was not in and of itself disruptive, just because some people found it offensive. Now, obviously, I agree that we should not have any tasteless or offensive shirts in schools, particularly those that target people for certain reasons. But we also want to make sure that whatever we do, we work in the confines of both the law at the federal level in the Tinker case, and also at the state level in terms of Section 83 and Pile B South Hadley. How'd I do?
You got a career ahead of you.
Oh, God, I'll leave that to you.
If I may.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. What are you guys are freshmen in high school now?
Yes.
Awesome. This is it's so cool that you did this. This is something that I would have done when I was your age. I wouldn't have been probably so respectful as you have been here, and impressive. I think that I have absolutely no opposition to opening up these policies again. It's very timely. You know, this is like Alex said. I think these policies were around before I was in middle school, and they haven't really changed much. And you know, this is the type of thing that's happening nowadays. People are realizing that these policies are out of date. So I'd absolutely be open to the idea of us starting from the bottom and reading through with it. This isn't the time or place to do a constitutional law lecture, but you guys are right that, especially in a public school in Massachusetts, your rights don't end at the school gates. When you walk into school, we can't do anything that would abridge the constitutional rights that Alex and you all have talked about today. And I think the other thing is that it's been a while since I've been out of school, but I think we've always had a pretty good track record in Littleton of being very respectful and professional students. So to my knowledge, there haven't been tremendous problems like there have in other districts. So, maybe time where where we talk about whether or not our community is prepared for this type of thing. I think it probably is. So I think maybe we should have a conversation another time. If you guys could, I know you talk about your proposal throughout here, but I'm assuming you probably have something written up that's the actual proposed language, so maybe you could email that to us so we could read it and give it to our administrators to see what they think about it. Thanks.
I'd like to thank you guys for coming up. I think we reached a consensus where, and I agree, there's some language in there that is a little off-putting and can probably be much more elegantly put and much more fairly put that'll still achieve the ultimate goal, which I think most of us are not going to really argue with too much about what the ultimate goal is. I think really what we're arguing with is execution and application, which is fine. And I think that this is one of these situations, and Mike alluded to it, that it hasn't come up because we are a small district. I think our norms are fairly conforming day in and day out, and it hasn't been a problem. I have absolutely no problem with you guys saying, well, wait a minute, it's not. It is a little, and that's okay. That's a matter of fact, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. In some ways, I wish it would. So I applaud you guys for coming up. I think Daryl's right, though. I think we have our dress code at the school committee level done this way for a particular reason. Not every school committee, school district does it the same way, but many do. And that's fine. I like what Daryl said, that I think we should go back down into the school level and talk about it, but I think that you guys are owed this being done on a timely basis, and that we're not just paying lip service to this and we'll get around to it eventually. If we want to get it done, let's get it done. So I would charge the admin team to take a look at this, and regardless of what we ultimately decide to do, let's get a process and a timeline in place that we can all agree on, and come back to us with that, so we're just placated with that, and we know that our constituency is being served in that regard, and then we'll go through the exercise and we'll see where we end up. I'd like to believe that it'll be a good process. It always has been, in my history, it's been a good process. We may not always agree, but I think at the end of the day, we'll realize everybody had a fair chance at getting their viewpoint put out there, and we'll go from there. Okay?
What the timeline of the process now?
If you have one.
already
established.
It's already established.
Okay, yes, that would be
Yeah,
great.
so the October meeting for school council is set, and that's where we set our agenda for the rest of the year and our goals. And the November meeting is where we're going to open up the first of 3 policies that we're talking about this year in the handbook, which is the dress code. And I sent Kelly.
And that's for the middle school council?
Yes, and I
Okay.
sent an email to Kelly sometime early today after lunch, just letting her know that we'd like them to come to that meeting. And that process won't be done in that one meeting.
Right.
That's when they'll get to give the proposal and share their thoughts. And then at the next probably 2 to 3 meetings, because it takes time to do
Yeah.
the policies, we'll have parents, student representatives, and by the end of the year, there'll be a new handbook policy in place theoretically, and you guys will.
Okay. Now, one of the points, though, that they made was not, this isn't necessarily an issue for them specifically at the middle school, is do we have some way of making sure that we're going to address this at the high school level as well?
Right, it should be consistent.
Yeah, I just met the girls a couple weeks ago. So what I'd like to do is, first, I'm hearing of this is tonight. So what I'd like to do is meet with them next week, and we can talk about, we'll look right at the handbook. You actually quoted the high school language.
Yes,
It matched it as a proposal, I think. So, so let's talk about that, review that, and see if there's any tweaking that needs to happen. I'd like to hear your voice on that.
And I think that's important, because I looked at all four, and the ones at Russell Street and Shaker Lane, while I don't disagree that we can certainly take a look at them, I don't think they're as much at issue at the moment. But there's definitely, the two are so different, the verbiage is so different, and again, I think that we're trying to get to the same point, and that's fine, but I'd like it to be, for the student's sake and the family's sake, there's no reason why it shouldn't be a very smooth transition from one building to the other. Oh, that's what I thought it was, because that's what it was before, good, we're good to go. Plus or minus some degree of difference that where you think is representative of your philosophies as principles.
Yeah, and just out of respect for that process, it's always been a school council.
Right, and I'm not trying to
No, I
circumvent
get
that,
it,
right.
but it's a school council chore to put those handbooks and
Yeah.
those policies in place. So when 4 different school councils operate separately,
Right.
maybe that's a process that both these school councils need to look at each other's policies.
Exactly.
And just so that the record's clear, I didn't actually inherit that one. I inherited the handbook, and then after year 1, that list of bullets that people are unhappy with at this point in time was actually developed by the parents on the school council and the staff at that time with student input. And that's actually a different list than the original one. And it was, so I'm not picking and choosing whether it's a good list or not, but I want some, you had mentioned that you think I inherited. I just want the record to be clear that I didn't inherit that one. We did that work in year 2, and that list was developed in collaboration with students and parents and faculty. So we will look at it again, because this is a topic to be looked at probably over 3 or 4 years, I would imagine.
Very good question. Principal Harrington, has the high school held student council elections yet?
Student council election,
Yeah.
I think they're coming up. I think they're scheduled.
Maybe you two should think about putting your name in the hat. Sounds like a couple of
We
qualified
actually
candidates.
produced some representatives on a school council for students, so I was going to talk to them about that next week. We're going to open that up too, so that's cool. They sound very similar, but as you know, they're very
Right, yeah,
different.
very different. But are they precluded, are they mutually exclusive for student to be on one
It
or
would
the
be
other?
better to broaden the representation so
Yeah.
that you would have student council rep and student, separate.
So you
that-
get two qualified candidates.
Yeah, so, and the other thing we can do is certainly, we'll start with a meeting next week to talk and see what you think, and then we can bring it for a student, school council meeting as well. I think we'll handle it within the framework of the school council and the process of handbook revisions if there need to be any at the high school.
Yeah, I think the student council also should
What
be.
they're proposing is the same as the current language.
Okay. All right, Kelly, if you just keep an eye on the process and just.
I
see
will.
The 2 buildings, we line them up as best we can and as appropriately as we think is good. Okay?
For sure.
All right, very good. Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other interested citizens this evening?
And please do send us out an
Whatever documentation that you have, we'd like to see it, just to keep us in the loop, that'd be great. All right. Recognition. All right. Let's see notes. All right, I would like to call up Chuck DeCoste, our former school committee member, who was kind enough to carve out a few minutes out of his busy schedule as a selectman. We introduced your substitute, Mark Rombacher, earlier. And we talked about your making the jump, the second of us to make the jump in recent years from the school committee to the Board of Selectmen. I'm confident that's going to benefit the town and the schools. You were elected twice. You served a little over 5 years of 2-3-year terms. I will say that Chuck, who had 5 kids in the district, and a lot of times people wonder, well, is that why you do it, because you have kids in the district? Well, it certainly makes it more vested, but we've had people who don't. But I will say this, Chuck represented all the kids in the district and was probably one of the strongest advocates at the student level of any of the school committee members I've dealt with over the last lots of years. Some of us get, I'm more interested in budget a lot of times, and some people are interested in policy and some of the, wide umbrella things of education and curriculum. But Chuck was about the kids and the families, and he was in there representing. He clearly was one of also the strongest at community outreach and staying plugged in. If you saw him at Donnellan's, you could talk to him, and probably you would realize you made a mistake at some point, and he was going to talk more than you did, but he would definitely let you get your 2 cents worth in as well. So I thought those were your strengths. I appreciate it. We will miss that part of it, but we know you're not too far away, and we'll take advantage of it. So, in recognition of your service and appreciation for your dedication and commitment to our students, you were the member, secretary, and vice chair for 2010 to 2015. Thanks, Dave. Mark's the last time I'm going to give you the microphone.
Turn it off.
Sure, Kirby's turned it off. Michael, thank you for the kind words. I hope that came across not just to yourself, but to the whole community. That was one of my biggest objectives, was to be a constituency type of candidate or member of the school committee, and I hope that people still feel that way, whether it has to do with the broader aspect of the entire town, or if there are members of the community that don't feel they know any one of you 5 members well enough, please continue to reach out to me. I know these guys all pretty well. I have a very good relationship, in my opinion. Some others might tell you otherwise, with each of them, as well as all the administration. And I'm very comfortable bringing any matter forward to anyone in the room here. So just to kind of throw that plug out there, if anybody feels more comfortable coming to me with any issues, please continue to do so. I would like to stay plugged in, and hopefully my schedule will allow me to attend more school committee meetings to keep you guys honest. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Chuck.
All right. We have some other items of recognition, Kelly, I think are more your bailiwick.
Yes, yeah. Just wanted to make sure that I mentioned the custodians publicly and thank them for the tremendous job that they did getting our schools ready. For those of you that are around the community in the summertime, you realize how often our schools are being used. In fact, two out of our 4 schools are full right up to the second last week of August, and the middle school is used quite extensively as well. It's not an easy feat getting those schools ready for the startup, and if you've been in our schools already, the floors are shining. You can, almost like a mirror when you walk down the hall. And there's some painting has been done. The schools just look great. And we don't have a lot of custodians, and they work very, very hard. And as you all know, this summer was a pretty hot summer on top of it, and did a tremendous job. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for what you've done. Our technology team is also worthy of recognition. If you think back 4 or 5 years ago, technology in our district, we were struggling a lot, and a lot of it was because of the age of the equipment, and our networks were kind of duct taped together, etc. And we reassessed where we were and where we needed to go, and through that process, we have great technology for our students to use. Our networks are robust, they're dependable. I don't remember the last time I've ever heard anybody tell me that they couldn't take a class and use technology because it wasn't working. And although our technology is up to date, I say that loosely because after 2 months it's out of date, but it does what we want it to do. It takes a lot of work to maintain our technology and our network so that they are seamless. And we've had a seamless start to the school year in all aspects of operations, and that's not easy. So it took a lot of work from our entire staff in our school district to make this happen. I don't have cafeteria staff on here, but you can imagine how much they had to do to get ready for the first day of classes. And they were humming in those kitchens, and the food smelled great the first day of school. So thank you to everyone who helped make our first day back such a success. Our welcome back breakfast, I felt went very, very well. I was able to give a plenary address on best and next practice, joining the education revolution. I have it on our website. Please feel free to take a look at it. I have a few links that will engage you in what's happening throughout our nation in terms of entrepreneurship and education, public education. And I concluded with an iconic song that speaks volumes about the revolution, so to speak, in all aspects of society. And obviously it's by the Beatles, so that will entertain you at the very end of the presentation. A topic that's near and dear to my heart. In order for us to truly meet the needs of students as we move forward, we need to be innovative. And innovation has to come from the top right down to the trenches. As a school committee and as a central office team, we need to lead by example. And if you do that, we will always succeed in accomplishing what we set out to do. Our teachers feel more comfortable taking risks. That's something that's changed over the few years. It's always a tough balance between making sure that our students do well on standardized tests, and at the same time asking our teachers to let go of traditional pedagogy and moving into more progressive pedagogy. And they have, and it's visible every time I walk through a classroom in all of our schools. And I want to encourage them to continue to do that, and we need to encourage them at this level as well. If you're going to take a risk, you're going to make mistakes, and you're not going to succeed all the time. But we always talk about learning being an iterative process. Our teachers are learning all the time, and it is an iterative process. So, again, I'm looking forward to this year. We've already had some exciting things happening in our classrooms. If you follow our Twitter account, you can see what's going on there. On my own Twitter account, I'm starting to tweet some of the articles out that I send other members of our school system and the school committee as well. So it's not only about what's happening in our district, it's about some of the things that are happening throughout the world. So, and I'll stop there.
Excellent. I was at the staff welcome, and I made some brief remarks. I started off in the cafeteria. There was a nice little buffet breakfast thing going on, and all the teachers started streaming in, and other support staff. And I was looking around, and then we went down to the auditorium, and I realized something. And then my remarks, I asked everybody in the room that lived in Littleton to raise their hand, and it was shocking. Probably close to a third of the group put their hands up.
Yeah.
And I thought it was representative of, we do have a great district. We have people that care about it, and they love the district because they love Littleton, and they're here, and they're investing in many different ways. And I think we really reaped the benefit of that. So it was a great morning. It was also we talked to the teachers about the fact that we did start before Labor Day. We haven't done that before. I asked them that we would like to hear from them at some point what it was like, but before we talked about it, I would like to actually talk about the end of the year, because I want to see what that part of it is, because it's a kind of a two-edged sword. One is starting early, hoping to get out early, and we'll see what that's like. So it was a good day and a good kickoff, and we survived the first few days, and then a couple of tough days this week. The weather finally broke, so I think we'll move on from there. All right, we're going to move on to new business. I'm going to do this one first. Dr. Branco, you're doing the Pac-Man. No. You are the one who's doing it.
Yes.
So you're here for the duration.
Oh, sure.
So I'm going to make you stick around anyway.
All right.
And we're going to talk about the high school fee structure, athletic fee structure, regarding a proposal that outlines a new fee structure for the boys ice hockey program. We have Mike Lynn, our athletic director.
Yes, to go.
Good evening. I'm here tonight, and Howie Schneider, our ice hockey coach of 14 years, is also here tonight to talk to you about ice hockey fee structure. This is in reaction to trying to control costs in our athletic program. Howie and I have had a bit of a ritual every spring where we work on the ice together. He's working more closely with the rink manager and trying to come up and meet our budget, and we haven't been able to do that the last couple of years. And it's been a real challenge for Howie and I, because we tend to, I won't call it butting heads, but I'm saying we've got to get the line item down there, and he's saying I can't do that. And when I really looked at the schedule of ice that he had put together, you really can't, because we're really only scheduling 60-minute sheets for practice, 75 tops as far as practices. And I think of like my own job as a coach, we practice for 2 hours. I don't know how I would do 60 or 75 minutes, but we're already at that point. So Due to policy changes and fee increases from the Groton School in recent years, our ice time budget has risen dramatically in the last 2 years. Our ice time budget has gone from $12,000 just a few years ago to $17,000 this year, not including playoffs. And that's with what I just said, that 60 to 75-minute sheets. They are charging us $210 per hour. And the other thing about ice hockey is it has all of the same costs as all of our other sports. So if we're talking about equity, they have paid coaches, obviously paid officials and game help people. Transportation's provided and uniforms, equipment, but in addition, they have this ice fee that is quite substantial. It's one of our largest line items, aside from transportation and coaches that we have in our overall program. So we are proposing the following solution: keep ice hockey on the same user fee structure as all other sports, which is $200 with a $550 family max. This would include Littleton and Bromfield student athletes, and I should make people aware that many years ago, I don't want to say the exact amount of years, Steve might remember, he was definitely here, I think, when this happened. We started charging the Bromfield kids an additional surcharge. They've been paying $732 for some reason for many years. Can't remember how we arrived at that number exactly. And that is something that we probably would like to see go away and charge Littleton kids and Bromfield kids the same user fee. But then in addition, there'll be this ice hockey surcharge that I'm going to bring up just next. The other piece, the Bromfield piece that people should understand, we've been a co-op ice hockey program for, Howie, help me out? 15 years then. 17 years, I'm sorry, 17 years. The life of the program has been a co-op. People should understand that co-ops only exist as a needs-based situation for the host school. Our numbers right now, we may not continue to be a co-op. It's nothing that we want to stop, but we cannot continue to reapply for that co-op every 2 years if our Littleton numbers are strong enough to sustain a varsity and the sub-varsity games that we're able to offer. We cannot continue to reapply for that. So that additional revenue of Bromfield at 732 might not be there in the years to come. As of right now, we're not sure that we're going to be able to, we're going to do it this year because it's in year 2 of a co-op cycle. But you should also understand that because it has more than just the 2 schools together. There's a financial piece to it that we have been charging them more. So we'd like to bring them back around to being on the same base user fee as the Littleton student athletes, keeping in mind that they might not be there in the years to come. What we would do, though, is assess an ice rental surcharge for all participants. It was actually, when I first became the AD, which has been 11 years now, we had an ice rental surcharge for a couple years that actually then went away after a couple years. Formula for this surcharge would be, one potential formula for this surcharge would be as follows. Total ice rental bill for the regular season divided by the total amount of players would equal the ice surcharge. The one thing that Howie had mentioned to me, he had asked maybe it would be good to have a number not to exceed this number. Again, this is where I think school committee comes into play, is where do you want to see this go? But right now, given we have 42 kids signed up for ice hockey, 42 potential student athletes. Right now, our ice bill is $17,000 heading into the season, and that's with 60 to 70-minute sheets for practice. Those aren't 2-hour sheets. And that would break down to $404 additional per each student athlete on top of the $200. In the school committee packet and the single-page presentation that I provided for you, you see the last bullet. We were the only district that I know of that was offering ice hockey at the same price as all other sports. It is what it is. Ice hockey is a very expensive sport to come up through the ranks. Youth ice hockey is how much these days, Howie? How much for Neshoba? For Neshoba? 2,000 and more for club ice hockey. So, and then there's tournaments and things of that nature. So Acton Boxborough, their ice hockey fee is $405. It's a special fee structure for ice hockey. Groton Dunstable, this seems kind of crazy to me, but it's $719.19 for varsity and $604.11 for JV. They have a $400 user fee with a surcharge for the ice. Lunenburg is $750. They have a $250 user fee plus a $500 surcharge. in Westford Academy is $650 for the boys and $575 for the girls. Again, it's a special fee structure at Westford Academy. Those are the schools that we looked into. They were neighboring districts. Lunenburg's in our league, but the other ones are, and Groton Dunstable's also in our league. The other schools just neighboring, similar socioeconomic towns. So that's where we're at. Howie and I one of the discussions we had is Howie said, I'd rather see a surcharge than have you say, I need to reduce the ice, and we have to then go without what we need to run a program. So it's kind of what gave rise to this, and also just trying to control our athletic program costs, and I've already been forewarned that in the years to come, we're going to have to, take a hard look at some things. So we're trying to be a little bit proactive here, but also be equitable, and maybe I should stop talking and see what kinds of things people have.
All right, before we get into the discussion, I just want to make sure everybody understands, Mike, you hit it pretty good, but the issue with ice hockey is that we do not practice or play in buildings we own. We have to go out and rent the facility. We don't have the luxury of, like, basketball, we have gyms, football and soccer, lacrosse, we have fields. Ice hockey, we have to go get the ice. And it would be similar if we had a swim team where we'd have to go rent pool time. We don't have a swim team, so we're not addressing that. But we do have a hockey team, which I think is great. We've talked in the past about how, for a school our size, how robust an athletic program we have, and we talked in the spring about our level of participation is terrific, and it's truly beneficial to the kids. And one of the things that you didn't hit on that you and I talked about, and we talked a little bit about this at our retreat earlier in August, was that one of the real issues is that if we don't do something here, we're going to negatively affect the experience for the players in the sense that they're going to have less ice time. And I don't think that's something, I know that's not something, if I don't have a child that plays ice hockey, I don't even have a kid that can skate, but other than that, I would be, as a parent, I'd be like, I want to do something. What are we going to figure out? I don't want my kid to not be on the ice. I want him to participate. I don't want her to not be in the pool. I want her to get the full benefit of the experience. What are we going to do to solve this? So not only are we dealing with the budget issue, but we're dealing with trying to keep a viable experience for the kids and letting them take advantage of it. They're good kids. They work hard. They compete. They deserve every opportunity to get after it the way we afford all our other sports to do so. So that's a little bit of the background where we're going for. We'll start this in. Alex, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Yes, after we discussed this a little bit, just on a cursory level at the August meeting, I went out and looked at what other school districts in the area are doing, and right now we are pretty far below the average in what the fee structure is, which is a nice luxury, but that's what it is. It's a luxury, and so I can definitely see how, if we want to give our kids more time on the ice, that this is the way that we're going to have to pay for it. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so I totally support this. What they didn't tell you is that, they have done a very good job over the years of keeping the price low. I know the hockey team plays at some pretty weird hours when they talk about practice and things like that, so it's hard to ask the team to go back and, try and get the price down anymore. A couple of questions I had was, this is not going to be included in what a family cap is, right? So a family, it wouldn't be minus whatever this price is, correct?
Yes, and that's something that is critical that people understand, that this is over and above our family max structure. And that's $200 per sport,
Yeah.
the $550 family max inclusive of both schools.
Right. And that makes sense because it's a surcharge specific to this one sport. It's not
Like Mike alluded to, it's a surcharge specific to the fact that we have to rent the facility, and it's a cost that we incur for this sport only, and this sport has all the other costs of, with officials and transportation and coaches and everything else.
So now, I have one question for you and Howie. In the description that we have in our packet, and that's up on the screen, it talks about a formula where the cost will be the amount of the ice divided by how many players we have. And I imagine maybe Howie's the coach. You probably would not want, would you want to have a cap that's set where if you lose players that it wouldn't go above a certain amount? Because you could see how students may, if they don't know how much it's going to cost when they're going into it, may choose not to play, then the cost goes up a little bit more, and you have a couple more kids who decide not to play.
So my feeling on that is you pick a cap that sounds reasonable. And like this year, if it was $400, the issue you're gonna run into is, I have 42 kids signed up now. How many kids are gonna be playing in week 2?
Right.
Could be 44, could be 36. And we won't know that, so do we not set the user fee to that, or do we take an average and we guess? If we get rid of the co-op, the number's gonna drop to 32, 33, and then all of a sudden the price goes way up. So, as a parent of kids and stuff, I hate the user fee. We had one, we lost that battle 10 years ago, so, it's part of the world. But if we can come up with a number that makes sense financially, and we say, okay, we got $17,000 worth of ice, maybe the school has to pick up $1,000 of that some years maybe we go a little bit over, because the numbers are better than what we estimated. So, I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think you can nail it down to $4.04 and $404.12. I think if you pick a number like 400 is good, and if the number drops below, and so what happens, let's say we're 28 kids. Well, at that particular point, we don't need $17,000 worth of ice. So we can cut back, but you're not gonna cut it so that it's the same number.
Right.
It's something that, so is it worth 500, or is there a cap on that? I think that's something that we can address so that everybody's happy with that.
Right, so I'd be inclined to say that we should create the formula and say, because the other thing is, it probably doesn't make sense for you to come back every year and say, is 410 good now instead of 400? So I'd be inclined to say, establish the formula with a maximum of either 550 or 600, and say that at that point, if you're proposing to go beyond that, then you come back to the school committee to get approval to go beyond that. And then in between that, 550 and less, or 500 and less, then it's just within the discretion of you
And
all.
then there's one last thing, that final number is kind of weird. So I have $17,000 now, and that's the number we're going with, and I need a couple more sheets, because we go a whole week without, because Groton School closes. So I'm gonna get rid of a couple sheets, because we have conflicts anyway. So the 17,000 is a good number. But I will tell you, during the school year, we're gonna lose 5 sheets of ice. Because of snow, because of whatever.
Or if it's like last winter, 10 sheets
Well,
of
but you
ice.
don't even, there's
Right,
other things
yeah.
that come up too. All
I
of a
know.
sudden there's an event or something, school, football team makes it.
Right.
I lose that sheet of ice because we cancel practice so kids can go to the Super Bowl, whatever. Okay? So we're now down to 16. Do we estimate at 16? Do we play that game? So I'm saying it's not, and it's very hard to get an exact.
Right, it's a fluid number anyway.
I know for sure I have $17,000 worth of ice now. I know when our final ice goes before playoffs, and hopefully we'll make it, we'll be about 16. Okay, so, but I'm not saying we start at 16.
Right.
So-
You can take 17, take the rest and apply it to next year's ice bill.
But I'm saying, if
Can you do
next
that?
year you only have 36 kids, don't make it
We can
four-
set up the
Right.
460.
Right, no, exactly. I give you room to, so that's what I would say.
Let's go down the line. I have some comments on that, too. Let's just keep going. I think that's going to get debated, so. Mark.
Sure. I think the fee proposal is a good one. I do think you need to have a cap going in so that everyone can know roughly how much it's going to cost to pay ice hockey. My only other question is, what about hardships, right? What if a kid can't, don't we waive the fee now, the $200 for hardship cases, and what do we do in this case?
I would say that this would be wrapped up into our hardship policy, that if a student qualifies for free and reduced lunch, that they would qualify for a full waiver of both fees. That would be my take on that, because if a family can't afford the standard user fee, I don't think they can afford the ice. I guess the question then becomes, would we subsidize, how would that work if it was a Brownfield student athlete? Because what gave rise to the 732 was the fact that we did not really want to because we were subsidizing ice hockey so heavily, keeping it we've had kids playing ice hockey with, if they had multiple siblings, they would cap out in the fall and ice hockey would roll around, and they might have 2 kids in that program and pay $0. And ice hockey's a very expensive program to run. We need it. We have 42 kids signed up. It's been a strong program for us. We need to do it, but it does come at quite a cost. I guess the question then would be, what would we do with Bromfield? Would we subsidize that student athlete if they were on free and reduced lunch in Bromfield?
Well, do we subsidize our athletes who play in out-of-district sport?
No. So, good question. But one thing I talked about with Kelly preceding this, when we talked about the Bromfield piece, we have kids who go play ice hockey for Westford Academy, our girls.
Right.
We have kids who swim at Bromfield, and they do not charge us more then they charge their own, but they're already adhering to a formula like is right here. Westford Academy takes, their formula is basically they take the rental fee and divide it among participants, but they do not charge our kids more. And Bromfield has higher fees as it is. They don't really, the Bromfield School District does not provide a lot of funding to their athletic program, and our kids pay the same fee. I do know that the Bromfield principal was unhappy with the fact that we were charging Bromfield kids $732, we were charging our kids $200.
I'm going to actually ask that we not worry about the Brownfield thing. To me, that's a separate discussion. In terms of, I mean, I have no problem
Yeah.
talking about Brownfield not paying more than our kids are going to pay, but in terms of the waiver, we can deal with that. Either if you guys can deal with it, deal with it, and if you can't, if you need direction from us, come in. That's
Yeah.
a separate question.
Okay.
So let's just get this question resolved, and then we can go from there. Okay, that all right?
Yep.
So you're all set?
I'm all set.
Okay, Darrell?
Yep, no, I had a couple of questions. The fee one was one that I think we all want to talk about there. I'm more inclined to look at a number so that parents can plan on what the number is. There's no mystery that 10 kids drop out and all of a sudden the fee's going to go up, kind of thing there. The other two kind of go around equity and the other pieces there. So games, who pays for the ice time for games?
That's included in that 17,000. So a game sheet is 120 minutes. That's what we're doing for game sheet, 120, and 60 to 75 for practice sheets. So that's part of that $17,000 total ice bill for the season.
Because I guess one of the things, as I was looking at policy and consistency there, for, just as you point out here, for all teams, we pay for the coaches, we pay for the transportation, we pay for the arena there. Would we want to be considering that the games should be included as part of their base sports fee? Just throwing it out there, because it's what we do for all the other sports. We don't necessarily pay extra for practice time, and should the fee be applied to the practice time there and sort of set the budget up? I'm just talking about it there, just throwing it out. Not so we don't need to debate it right this second. The other part was just a little bit on equity. You run a JV team also with this here?
It's coming,
Or
currently, yes, because we have 42 student athletes signed up. There were 2 years, two recent, so one of Howie's concerns was, hey, Mike, the numbers have fluctuated over the years. Right now, we're riding a high of a lot of kids with interest in ice hockey. There's been a couple years where we didn't have sub-varsity. There's been, the last 2 years preceding this, we've had a quote-unquote JV program. It's not as structured a JV program as, say, JV soccer or JV baseball. It's basically Sunday morning. It's a 1-hour sheet. They typically play another school. Howie will send some of his fourth-line forwards and some guys that maybe also aren't getting as much varsity time as he like. Then he has a core group of kids that are also JV. With the numbers he's talking now, we'll have a pretty delineated group of varsity and JV, because 42 will probably be an all-time high, I think, for us. It's an all-time high. I think before that was 36, right?
Yeah, 36. We're looking at a little more next year, that's why the co-op's in jeopardy.
And that's why I brought up the co-op, which seems like I maybe was getting off topic a little bit, but I'm not, because it's been part of our funding structure, because that 732, not a handful of years ago, we were at like 50-50 Littleton and Bromfield kids. So if there was 30 kids playing, 15 of them were for Bromfield, we had 15 kids paying 732. The Bromfield numbers are declining and might go away completely. And so this is also in response to, in reaction to how are we going to, if the co-op does go away, we're still going to need to fund this, and we're going to have less income coming in because we won't have those Bromfield kids at 732.
So the question comes, and then, again, I'm not that familiar with exactly how you run the piece there, but would all the players get approximately the same ice time? That I wasn't sure if you had a JV team that gets less ice time than the others, which would imply a lesser fee. I just want to know how you run for equity there. I wouldn't want somebody coming in and saying that we're paying for ice time, but they're only getting a few minutes because they're not on the lead team or on the.
It's a very good question, Darrell. It costs much less money to run our JV programs in general than varsity teams, but yes, the JV kids would not be getting as much ice time as varsity. If we were to kind of say percentage-wise, what percentage less do you think they get
Let's just make sure we understand the question.
Be cautious.
We're not talking about ice time in terms of your participation in a game.
No,
Do you get to play?
It's talking
right.
about time-
It's do they get
time on the ice.
Number of times that they go to the rink.
Right.
Yes,
If
it's
the
less.
number of times they go to the rink is equivalent, then the fee should probably be equivalent. If they only go 2/3 of the time, then we should probably think about only charging the JV kids
So, and Mike
$250 fee.
can speak from this because he had experience. So, there is no JV program, per se, okay? Very few of the schools have them, but we all have the numbers for JV. And so you get all these kids who want to play hockey, so what do? You either do cuts or whatever. So what we've done for the past 15 years, say, even those 2 years we didn't have enough numbers, we had 24, 25 kids, I would take my third and fourth line varsity and schedule 12 games. So I don't have one separate sheet of ice. We might this year have one for JV. So we share ice. Varsity and JV share ice.
For practice.
For practice. So the first half of practice, we're doing full ice stuff, then we split them, JV and varsity, or whatever it is. Now, there is no JV leagues really, so what happens is over the course of time, I have made contact with other coaches, and I schedule between 14 and 20 JV games.
How many varsity games do they
20,
play?
20 varsity.
20.
Last year, we had 18 JV games.
Okay.
Now, the JV games cost us less, because I get a bunch at Groton School, they pay for them. We had 3 buses last year with creative scheduling, so the JV program, I've been really holding the cost on that.
Okay.
And so the question, so I can answer your question directly, the ice, I have 2 types of practices, a varsity and JV and a varsity only. Theoretically, there should be varsity ice only and then JV ice only.
Right.
It's not a question of, do we want to pay more money, it's a question of, can't get any more ice.
Okay.
We're maxed, I took every sheet of ice that we could get.
Okay.
Okay? So what happens is, if you look at the schedule this year, Mondays are JV varsity, Tuesdays are varsity, and we play Wednesday, Thursdays both, Fridays varsity only. Varsity game on Saturday, varsity game on Wednesday, JV game on Sunday, and then generally one other game during the week, because I get them as many games as far. The games are pretty equivalent, okay? But I would say the actual number of touches is about 2/3
Okay.
of what the varsity is.
Okay.
And the other issue I'm going to have this year, we have so many numbers, I'm limited to 36 kids on the ice, and we didn't want to do cuts because we don't really know the numbers. So not every kid's going to participate in every JV practice or game. They'll do most because kids are sick, and kids have conflicts at that level. So we're going to get them most. But I would say JV players, Mike, is that fair at 2/3, you think?
I would have said that it was, that the JV players played slightly more than 2/3. It didn't feel like only 2/3, but.
I mean, you can go look at the actual calendar.
You can go look at the calendar, right, it's online.
But it certainly isn't half, and it's certainly not equitable.
And the thing that Howie said is that there were oftentimes, like for me, I was one of those bubble players where but there was multiple times where, like I was saying, it's one team, and he's sort of putting together a bench for each time. So you might have a couple players who get called. You know, there was one year, my junior year, where I got called up to some of the varsity-only practices for a handful of them, but didn't go to many of them. So I think it's hard to say an exact number because there's some, right, if you have a couple kids who are sick, you might have people playing who otherwise wouldn't.
Now, the other thing is varsity, and you play, at a high level, so now ice time is not equitable.
Right.
We all know that.
Right.
Number of rink touches is.
Right. Yes.
JV, we use that, we're a real development program. We take real pride in that, and ice is exactly the same for JV kids. And Ryan can attest to that. If you're out there, you're going to skate in a game the same number. Best kid's going to play the same amount as a brand new kid.
I just want to add to this, because these are type of logistical pieces you might not see if you're not kind of in the trenches doing this. One problem with having a separate varsity and JV type fee, we're not going to know who's varsity and JV. Daryl had talked about how can we let parents plan? Can we assign a number? Can we have 42 signed up? Will we just say, look, we're calling it. 42 are signed up. We're going to take the 17,000, divided by the 42, not to exceed this number, and we're going with that. And then if there's some drop-offs or whatever, but Howie's not going to, he's going to go, how long till we say varsity JV delineation?
But it's usually within a week, but the issue you have there is, like Mike says, so to run a varsity practice, I don't want just 18 varsity kids or 19. I want 24, 25, or 26. So I pull up to help those JV kids develop. So you have what we call bubble players, that they're doing both. So they they don't play in the varsity games, but they practice with the varsity. So I'm looking for next year and the year after also.
So hockey isn't, when we make our varsity and JV baseball, let's just say, it's pretty clear cut, unless there's injuries, those kids are going to be on that team. Hockey doesn't really operate like that. There are some kids that are clearly JV, but there's a whole group of kids in the middle, and it would get tricky to assess this fee and truly declare who's varsity and JV for that whole middle group.
Two-thirds, let's say it was two-thirds of a $400, or let's say a $500 fee, you're talking a difference of what, about 100 and...
I wanted to bring it up to
Right.
make sure, because I don't, the JV practice half as often as that, which parents would say, I'm paying the same as these other kids and getting half the amount of ice time, not game time, there, which would probably put us in an awkward position of it. If you're telling me it's a two-thirds, three-quarters, there's some level of parity there, I don't have that problem there.
And
It's
that's
just I
what
wanted.
your personal tolerance level? Two-thirds, is that?
Well, no, I'm just
Well, I'm just curious.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I got a number now. It's
Okay.
about two-thirds.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not.
And it is hard to differentiate.
Yeah.
There's going to be kids who are clear JV, but there's kids who aren't.
Yeah.
And I will say that, being a parent and not wanting to spend the money, I've thought a lot about that, and you will get some complaints, certainly.
Mhm.
We've never had a complaint from Brownfield about that, where a kid is playing JV and they play two-thirds or less, even, and they're paying $732. It's their opportunity to play hockey. And it's still at a pretty good rate.
And one last thing I'll say, having been there, is Howie's right. We really do a very good job of, when you play on the hockey team, you play on the hockey team, and you don't. It's not like when I played JV soccer. I played JV soccer. Playing on the hockey team, you have so much of the experiences together. There's meetings. There's most of the practices are together. It's not. You don't ever feel like you got a JV badge or a varsity badge on you, because it is so fluid and changes so
You
often.
get the same
So
equipment, same jackets, same bags.
Yeah, so-
Same practice shirts.
yeah, so I think that you might get complaints from parents who they really are feeling like their kid's not getting as much time, but I think for most people, they're going to think, I'm playing the same team, that, they're going to go to the games and watch, and they're going to probably be playing varsity at some point in their lives, and so.
No, I'm comfortable with the discussion that you gave me. I just wanted to make sure, I just brought it out, that, back in my mind, I wanted to make sure that there was some level of parity on that. And very comfortable with that.
My point of view is, I think we need to do this. I do not want us shifting the number around depending on kids dropping or not dropping. You guys need to sit down, figure out your best estimate, hit the number, come to us with the number, we'll approve it if we think it's reasonable, plus or minus something. I do agree, we should do it year by year, though. It's not going to be that big a deal, but we're going to set the number early, and we can do this at the next school committee meeting. You guys finish up your analysis, come up with it, set it, we'll vote it, and then the next year we'll do it again, and the next year we'll do it again, because it might change dramatically. If you go down to a smaller program 5 years from now, and you need less ice, it's going to be a totally different equation. But I don't want us tweaking it as the season develops. We set the number, because while it's important that we help alleviate the subsidizing of the ice hockey program from the budget, I don't think any of us is asking them to carry the full weight. We're still supporting them. And if we need to support them to some percentage of the ice, which we've already been doing, frankly, year in and year out, if we get to 90%, we're in way better shape than we were last year or the year before. We don't need to get to 100%. We're still going to be in pretty good shape, is my personal way of looking at it. So that's my consent. My thought, anyway, is if you guys have a consensus on that, is why don't you guys finalize a number for this year? We'll vote it next time, give it out to the parents, they'll be set to go, and let's just make this part of what we do early on in the year, every year. And if we get to the point where we're just voting the same number, and then and you say, hey, this is the way we're going to be for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm confident, and I'll only come back to you if I see a big discrepancy, then we can do that too. But let's just get it going for now, and we'll go step by step. Is that all right?
So we plan to approve that number at the October meeting so that
Yeah.
we can then inform
Yeah.
the ice hockey parents.
Yeah.
Unless you have a number tonight. This isn't new to you, to both of you. We've met during the
I mean,
summertime.
yeah, that's fine too. If you guys, if you're comfortable.
Because
Well, I think the number right now for this year is 404.
Well, again, especially what Mike just said, what I'd rather do is, and I don't know what the number is, everybody calculate and see what it looks like, is I'd rather take the 42 kids and the 16,000, which is what it's going to end up, instead of the 17, and go with that number. And let's say we do come in at 16.3, then the school picks up $300, which would be 98% instead of.
Yeah. The only,
Let's see what that number is. So $400 is, I think, at 17.
That's on the 17, it was 404.
So
If we want to go the Groton Dunstable, it would be the change, too.
I just look at it from the parent point of view.
Right, and
To me, it doesn't.
right. And I agree with what Mike said, it's now the trend to have fees like this statewide, but like at one point, 100 years ago, we decided to build a football field, and we decided to build basketball courts, and we decided to build tennis courts, so it's not fair to say that because this one sport came around a little bit later, that we shouldn't have any interest in the school spending some money on it. So if it happens to be that the fee ends up being $1,000 lower than what the ice is costing, then it shouldn't be a problem for us to.
It would be $380 if you do 16,000 divided by 40.
Right.
I think Howie and I have been working this together now for, I believe I'm in my 11th year, and he's in his 14th year of coaching. One of the rituals we have every winter is we're talking, and then I'll talk to the police department, or I'll talk to school administration, whether we're going to cancel ice. We're going to do it. There's going to be days, unfortunately, over the vacations where it's not that simple, but we'll say, you know what, we're just going to keep everybody home. And the Groton School is great to us, because the private rinks, you'd still pay for that sheet, because you didn't do it every how many hours. At Groton School, if we cancel, an hour before, they don't charge us. He takes it off the top. So it probably will result in that many sheets being taken away. And the other thing that we talked about during this process, every one of we've been, as has been discussed, we've been very fortunate in recent years to have literally every one of our varsity teams, like last year, every one of our varsity teams made tournament with the exception of one. And that's been the case for the last few years. We know, and people don't often realize this, success always costs you money. Our district, our athletic program has been costing us more money because our kids have been so darn good that they've been going to tournament. It's additional bus trips. It's additional officials. It costs money to go to Gillette Stadium is a perfect example. That doesn't come cheap, and we don't really get anything back from that. Or other teams that have gone to tournament. Hockey makes tournament. We don't penalize any of our teams for making that, so we're keeping that ice off it. So I think that if we figure that the regular season will be somewhere around 16,000 because we've got 17 booked, and some will come off the top because of weather and other issues. If we divide that 16 by 42, I think we have the number for this year.
Right.
So I'm going to, unless anyone has any.
No, I don't think it's good.
Oh, Chuck, go.
Here's a parent.
School committee alumni.
And a parent.
Good.
Parent, son's the captain.
I just want to make sure it's clear and it's communicated clearly to parents, because, so if you've got a student who plays football, it's a $200 fee, the 404 or the 350, whatever the number is, that's an ice surcharge.
Yes.
So regardless of what you've already paid, that 404 doesn't go towards the 550.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that that is clearly communicated.
Correct.
Because people are going to say, well, I already maxed out at 550.
Yes. No, we are definitely, thank you for clarifying that. We did cite that at the beginning of a discussion. It's taken a little while, which is fine. But you're right.
I also propose that we do it next year.
Okay, so the amount of 16,000 divided by 42 players equals $380. So I move to establish an ice rental surcharge fee in the amount of $380 for each high school hockey player
For the
for the 2015-2016 ice hockey season, and that this amount would not be included in the family cap of $550.
Mike, could you also, this is important, that's going to be inclusive of Brownfield, and we will no longer be giving them that other surcharge. Is that
Exactly, yep. So this is inclusive of all hockey, high school hockey.
all members of the Tiger Hockey Program, the same fee structure?
Yep.
Got you.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the
Mike,
hockey
you know,
season.
speaking of...
You guys, we'll look at this again next year.
Yeah, for sure.
Make it's working. I don't want to put anybody in an overpayment
No.
or underpayment
No, right.
situation. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it shouldn't matter to you, but it does.
No, it should.
So-
It does to all of us.
I
You said
think-
how, well, none of us is happy about setting fees, so we've talked about this for years. If we had what we think is a truly public-funded education system, we would get rid of all these, and this would be the first thing we do. but we don't have that. We got to deal with the situation on the ground, so.
I would say part of the process is the first meeting, they have to be here to first
Yeah.
approve the fee.
Yeah.
And the good news is we get our ice in May or June, so we have all summer to figure it
Right,
out.
right, and that's what, to Daryl's point, right, and you should have a decent grasp, plus or minus 5 or 6 kids on where we're going to be.
Again,
and-
we take account in June also,
Yeah.
which I don't need to do, but I do
Right.
for this reason, just because, so.
And
Right.
I don't have kids who play ice hockey other than on the pond or whatever, but they play every other sport but that. But if you pay the 200 and the 380, if you're at 580 for a full season of ice hockey, really, Dr. Harrington has a boy who plays hockey, and I think he'd tell you he'd be happy to pay 580.
Now, Mike, you football coaches all know each other, right?
Yeah.
You get Bill to hold off?
Oh, I don't know that. No, not that level. I thought you meant like Guy here, Shirley, or something like that.
All right, we're going to pick up the pace. Thank
All
you,
right.
guys.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right, Dr. Branco, Beckman Adnock.
They have to stay. They can't leave.
Too late.
All right, I can be quick with this one. So I'm back in front of you again to ask your permission for the 8th graders to travel to Packman-Adnock. Ms. Morgan is once again organizing this trip, and she wrote up a real quick blurb that I will just read quickly for you. 8th grade would like to take a field trip to Packman-Adnock in Miller State Park in New Hampshire. The date has changed on Friday, October 9th. I'm not sure if you had a different date originally. We had to change that based on the mountain. To take part in the Hawk Count, a national tally of raptors as they migrate to the south. Packman-Adnock is preferred because the Hawk Count has experts at the summit who help the kids find clusters of birds riding thermals, and they explain the migration to the kids. In the science program, they study the forms and functions of raptors. The trip also fosters health, physical education, and team building as the early part of the year begins. In the past, this has been a very successful trip, and we picked Mount Monadnock because it has a road to the top, so any student is able to participate, even if they are unable to hike. We regularly station chaperones at the top in the event that a student needs to ride down due to physical situations or any illness. I went on this trip for the first time last year in my time here, and it was a fantastic experience. I had never actually been there, and then to watch the kids bond, slow down in nature, have no phones with them, and really enjoy each other's company. The concept of being up there, really pay attention to the guides. It was a really cool bonding experience for 8th graders, and it was a nice educational opportunity. And we're blessed with the New England environment, and I think if we can get these kids out there as much as we can, it's worth doing it.
Great. Because this is an out-of-state trip, it just needs approval by the school committee. So we need a motion.
So what's the new date?
The new date is now October 9th.
Motion to approve the 8th grade Packman-Adnock field trip on October 9th.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just one thing, I always like the educational coupling of these field trips, but it'd be nice if sometime after it's completed, the students do a presentation.
Yeah, that'd be
Like they
great.
did last year.
Yeah, we could do that. Yep. Yep.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on.
Thank you.
Presentation, a video.
Yes, one of the videos that we were unable to get to during our retreat, it highlights the importance of social and emotional learning within public schools. And it does mirror the direction that we're currently moving in, but I think it's important for us to see this video and start using more common language when we're talking about social and emotional learning, and also realizing that in order to truly embrace this concept, it has to be interwoven into all of our curricula. Character education programs are a component, but they don't suffice in creating the culture that needs to be created. So, Steve, you want to click on it?
The essential skills for success in school, work, and life.
It's as loud as I can get it.
Social emotional learning centers their mind and body. It reduces their emotional tension so they can be open to new content and material. We find that academic outcomes increase exponentially when students are nurtured, loved, and cared for, that we get much more out of them when we first address social emotional needs. So for us, it's actually an academic intervention and not just emotional one. If we expect students to be college and career ready, it's important for us to focus on these skills and competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Self-awareness is the ability to identify your emotions, to be able to tie thoughts and feelings to behaviors. We find that self-awareness is one of the hardest things for young people, being aware of their own body space and the impact of their words and emotions on other people. So a lot of what we do is reflective, through conflict mediation, through circles, through journaling, having them see their own impact on the world, and then how to shift that or make a different choice next time. Self-management is the ability to self-motivate, to have self-control, to regulate one's emotions. In the classroom, that may be a breathing exercise, or that might be counting to 5, or taking a break.
So with students who don't really know how to deal with their anger, or don't really know how to resolve conflict, we're giving them a tool that helps them deal with it in a less stressful way.
Social awareness is about embracing diversity, showing empathy for others. Activities might include service learning projects, addressing social justice issues. Role-playing is a great opportunity for students to address how a person might have felt in a conflict on the playground.
We're going to see if other people have had some of the very same experiences around bullying that we have.
You're in my boat if you haven't bullied now.
Well, I see a lot of people.
Relationship skills are important in project-based learning. It's the ability to work cooperatively with someone, to resolve conflict. So one skill you need your whole life. You may not need calculus tomorrow, but you have to know how to work in relationships, whether it's for a coworker or a life partner. You have to know how to handle conflict and how to handle challenges.
Sometimes at recess, Maya would come over and like just start talking about it and saying it.
Is it your job to make Danae's job at some point?
I know it's a form of bullying, and sometimes I'll say sorry to her.
So you choose to be someone's ally and make that choice. Responsible decision-making is considering the well-being for self and others. It's evaluating the consequences for various behaviors or actions. We do this through shared agreements, one-to-one problem solving, or having students debate an issue.
You were like, hey, Kshita, can I, how much does an A cost in your building? And you would like, I got your wallet. You know, and I was like, $50. Or which one of us would be correct? You don't have that for the money.
We're truly teaching these students to be productive citizens. We're teaching them life skills. We're teaching them how to problem solve effectively. We're teaching them how to be resilient.
I think of all the billions of dollars we've spent on Title I and all these intervention programs, and when all is said and done, what do we have to show for it? I think we're trying to teach technical things instead of devoting some of the resources to teach who you are as a person. Once you know who you are, then learning becomes exciting because you've already established a discipline.
It's important for teachers and principals to understand that it can't be a binder off the shelf. It can't be something that happens from 2:15 to 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It has to be part of the school culture. Giving teachers flexibility, giving them a range of skills, giving them different ways that they can look, and allowing them to take their own personality and match that to what they want in their classroom has been the best way to get authentic, true practice.
If we continue to do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always done. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough for the 24/7. We need to be the outliers to try things that have never been tried and see if they work. What are we waiting for?
That's it. Yeah. So it reinforces the reality that social and emotional learning needs to occur in all of our classrooms, and it needs to be built into the instructional design of every classroom. We're making some significant strides in our district. Anytime we have opportunities for our kids to work together collaboratively in project-based learning or a cooperative learning environment, allows kids to develop these skills. So I thought I'd bring that to you. Social and emotional learning is a topic that's talked about a lot, especially in the last couple of years. And we've spent, or we've had more correctly, a number of conversations about developing soft skills in our students and also developing the whole child. And this is one area that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about, and we need to talk about it more than we have in the past. Any comments? Or?
I think it's great, and it goes along the lines of some of the things we're suggesting in the Pursuit of Excellence. So.
No, I think it makes sense, and actually, I think the comment in it that it's not on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I don't think it's a class. It's a way of doing business or way of teaching, that's fully integrated is I think a very important part there, because then it becomes just the way you do things rather than, oh, I've got to stop and remember that I'm doing it this way today.
Yeah, I think, Daryl's comment is good. There's a term for that style of learning where is it called embedded learning or something like that, where it's just something that happens in the course of teaching other subjects and things like that. So I think that's important.
I think it's awesome. We were talking a lot about this sort of thing at the Pursuit of Excellence Task Force, and it's wonderful. And Kelly, I know this is something that you've been talking about a lot over the past couple of years, and it's something that I'm really excited about as well. I just want to underscore how important it is that it's, and the video highlighted this very well, it's not just something that happens in elementary schools when kids are younger. Maybe it's easier to talk about issues of kindness or anger and these very sort of raw emotions or feelings or expressions. But even at the high school level, you can go a little deeper and create scenarios where there are going to be harder situations for students to have to figure out, which is going to be the reality of their lives, because life can be complicated, and being able to navigate those tough decisions is very important. So I'm very excited about it, not just because of how it will help students once they leave the school district, but also throughout their time here. It will also, I'm sure the benefits will be reaped in the classroom as well. Probably we'll see fewer students getting themselves into tricky situations and being more self-aware, and hopefully being able to resolve a lot of issues themselves in a more effective way. And this is something that in education is new. Not today, not this year, but it's new. It's a new approach. Before, I think a lot of this would happen along the way, depending on who the teacher was or who the students were or the experience at a given time, but being very deliberate about this. And we moved from doing, as a society, we moved from doing nothing, just doing the basic academic classes, and then moving a couple of decades ago more toward character educations, and then it was at times literally a class you would take. But I think this is much more effective because it blends in with everything else we're doing, and it doesn't take time away from those other things. It in fact enhances those things. So
very true.
I'm very, very glad that we're filing full steam ahead on this one. So thank you.
I like the comment you made in your statements you prefaced the video with using common terminology. We talk about that in coaching. It helps the players if we use the same terminology over and over again. It helps them relax. I know what he's talking about because that's what he talked about it yesterday, and it makes it easier to think about it naturally instead of stopping and remembering. It's just, no, this is how we talk. This is how we motion. This is how we get to this point. Easy. It takes you got to go up the learning curve, but once you get there, it becomes reactive instead of acting. So I think a lot of the stuff they talk about, those five if we can get going on those, I think we'll be in good shape. Excellent.
Great. Thank you for the input.
All right, we're moving on to old business. The first thing we have under this is a continued discussion of the FY17 budget, which is the budget we're going to do this year in preparation for the next school year. There were a couple things we talked about this at the retreat that we had in August. We're just going to go around that a little bit. Alex, you had some comments and ideas you wanted to put out there?
Sure. So at the school committee retreat, we're talking about having a budget visioning process, and this is something that I think there's a lot of interest in, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. We talked about this at our budget subcommittee meeting last week, and essentially what it would be is adding one part to the way that we do the school district budget. Now, over the years, we've gotten pretty good at doing the budget. We start sometimes in August and September looking at what our needs will be for the following school year, following those numbers, honing in, seeing different funding sources, and then coming out sometime late, middle of spring in March to present a budget from the subcommittee for the whole school committee to discuss, and then move forward with that to the town, which we've been keeping abreast of the situation the entire time, and then moving on to town meeting, and then we're on to the next budget year. What I think we can do even better, and this is not something that a lot of school districts are doing, so I think we would be ahead of the curve on this, is giving parents, students, teachers, and really the whole Littleton community the opportunity to say, before we really hone in on our costs, our figures, what we're looking at, what are your thoughts on the school budget? What are your thoughts for your school district? What do you care about? Because our budget is so much about not just how do we have X number of teachers and X number of classes, it's about what are our values and priorities as a community. And we all have, I think, a pretty good sense of that, but being able to affirm that and to get that feedback is very important, not just because it will mean that our budget is smarter and has more ideas and more perspectives in it from the get-go, but also because parents will feel more engaged, I think, throughout the whole process, which is important. By the time we get to March, a lot of the times, I think a lot of parents are saying, okay, well, we realize you only have a finite amount of money, but why couldn't we do this or that? And we say, and I think we say pretty clearly, well, we'd love to do that, or we'd love to look into that, but we just don't have those resources, and then it's a matter of working with the town and sometimes our state officials to figure out how can we stay afloat. And that's where we've been for the past couple of years, is how do we increasing here and there, but for the most part we haven't been able to actualize as much of our mission as we'd like to if given the resources. So my hope is that having a visioning process, which if you look at the end of the budget process from the subcommittee perspective as that hearing in March that we have every year where we get feedback on what we've presented, you can look at the visioning process as the beginning of that, where the school community and the town community can come together and say, hey, here are some ideas. And we don't need to, in this forum, at that moment, say, oh, that's a great idea or that's a terrible idea, but just take in and listen, and then we can go back to the budget subcommittee and say, okay, well, now that we have that sort of precursor to this discussion, let's look at the numbers, let's look at the cost drivers, let's look at the revenue. And so that, I think, would be an effective approach to have more community buy-in throughout the whole process and also improve the way that we work our budget throughout the year.
Excellent. Mike, any thoughts or comments on that?
No, I actually do think that that's a really good idea because, like when we put forth our budget, you two, Mike, every year you've been on here, do an excellent job of making sure that our workload is minimal because you guys are always on top of it. But I think that a piece that is missing when we talk about the idea of like advocating to the town as to why we need these, the budgets that we have, is to go and put forth all the things that we would like to do but aren't getting done. So Alex's idea of having a listening session where we on the school committee, the administration, members of the community come in and get to say, pitch their ideas for the budget, then you get a sense of all the things that you guys are keeping us on track with doing what we need to do, but then there's this plethora of things on the fringe that we aren't able to do, and that just goes to show about how valuable our budget is. So I think it would be worthwhile. I like Alex's point of doing it. It doesn't mean that we have to say, tally up all the numbers ahead and move forward with the budget, but if you do it early enough where it's, listening session, and then when you get to this time of year, you can sort of, recall some of those statements that were made.
True. I'm sort of mixed on it. I think there's some things that we should be doing, and whether we call it visioning or whatever is good, but I think we've got to be careful about setting expectations from those sessions there. You know, the way I look at it, we have a tactical budget, which is really building the budget for next year, and what we haven't really looked at, just using my terminology from my area, is a strategic budget. Where do we want to go? And those input sessions are to help guide that, and that coupled with the district vision and plan, help us maybe set our strategic priorities for investment. Because I don't think we have to be careful that we don't set up a situation where we invite people in for input and they say, these are our top 3 priorities. And the budget reality is it ain't going to happen there, of which it will just turn the public off from the process there. But I think if we frame it in terms of, we have some tactical things that we might be able to do over this next year, the order of plus or minus $10,000 investment type of things there versus $100,000, $200,000 initiatives that are probably going to come out of an input session like that, that we then factor that into where do we want to bring the district and using that process to help guide that. But I'm just concerned about setting the wrong expectations when people provide inputs and it doesn't show up in the next year's budget.
That's a really good concern.
And I think that's some great feedback, especially because in that one fiscal year, and because we have such a limited control over the revenue, we can do some grants and fees, obviously, which we try not to do it so much, but that's very limited in terms of what we can do. So I think absolutely it needs to be a longer-term perspective, because we're not going to be looking at the numbers now, particularly in the current fiscal environment. But I think even 10 years from now, we would find that there are going to be things we can't do, and being able to articulate that this is an opportunity for us to learn more about the pulse of the community on this issue while understanding that it's not all going to happen within the fiscal year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could make it, it's very equivalent to the master plan process there. It's where does the community want to be in, say, 5 years, or where would we like the school district to be in a few years, and then see if we can then, how do we advocate to the other boards and the taxpayers as to how we might be able to get there. Let alone managing the priorities of just meeting the educational directives.
I pretty much agree with what Darrell said. I think it's useful to have the strategic planning session to get the pulse of what people want, but you also have to set the expectations going in that it's likely that most of those things won't be funded. So,
Yeah, when Darrell said that, it reminded me of something. When I first got on the school committee, we had a procedure where we would go and hold a meeting at each of the school buildings during the year. And I remember Jane Hall said, the problem with that is, when you do it at Russell Street, the Russell Street parents come and they think that we're going to solve all the Russell Street problems that night, or very soon after that meeting. And she was right. There were some people in the room that was, well, you're here to solve Russell Street's problems, let's get on it. And that wasn't really what the idea was, and it caused some problems because we didn't set the expectation correctly. And I liked the way you said it, tactical versus strategic. I think if we can set the visioning on strategy, not programming, I think we'll have a better discussion. What are our goals at the high school level? We talk a lot about, 4-year degree participation, AP class. We talk about character development at the younger ages. Those types of things. What can we do? What are our goals? What do we think do we need to be focusing on? Some of it, and it's some of the things that are alluded to in the Pursuit of Excellence report, some of it is stuff that really isn't money-based. It's just, process, planning, execution in the classrooms on a day-by-day basis. Some of it is outside the classroom, outside the buildings. And some of it is like some more money to do some more things. So I think if we frame it right, I think we can have a good discussion. I definitely like the idea. I think you're right, Alex. We've missed out on this where if we get these kind of input at the end of the budgeting process, it really doesn't help. And we've probably set the expectation of we do the work, you guys will come and comment on it. I think it's a great idea. Like, let's have that, try to solicit as much of that input on a managed level on the early part of the front end of the process. I think would be great. It's something we haven't done a good job of in the past year, so we should definitely take a shot at it and see what we get out of it. So I think what's the idea that we would put that on the next
October
agenda?
1st. Mhm.
Okay, so we'll put that on the October 1st agenda. And I think it's important that the school administration, principals, get that message out there, because if we just put it on our agenda, we're going to end up kind of like this, plus or minus 4 or 5 people. It'll be the good 4 or 5 people. I'm not telling them not to come. They know who they are. But if we get it out there, we might be able to get those numbers up and make it
And
worthwhile.
just to recommend, like along the lines of Daryl, I can't remember if Alex said it that way, but the idea of billing it as a listening session, everyone does it. The legislature does that when they go around the state.
Right.
They do listening sessions because you can't really get into a debate, nor should we, because we're all, sort of preaching to the choir, like we're all sort of on the same team with this. But billing them as, we're going to hear everything that people have to say, even if it strays off a little bit, but the idea of, making it a town-wide conversation today about the, pros and cons of each.
And then maybe a good idea would be, a couple meetings after that, we've distilled it, and
Exactly.
we've gotten some input from, our team about, yes, these were good, these are things we are thinking about, gee, hadn't thought about it like that before, we can definitely think about that. And that would come back to the budget subcommittee and go through that process, I think would be worthwhile. So let's go ahead and we'll take a shot at that and see what we get out of it. Okay. The other thing that we talked about was, I think it would be worthwhile early on in the process, again, prior to actually crafting the entire budget, to do some presentations on a cost center by cost center basis to help put some more detail out there to the public, to have them understand when we talk about transportation, or we talk about the physical plant, when we talk about general ed staffing, where we at in each building, what does that entail? We really haven't done a lot of that recently, and I think that would be beneficial. And I think that if we get that out early, that then when we circle back onto those things, when we actually present the budget, everybody's going to have a much more detailed frame of reference to understand this is what we have to do, this is what we're going to do it, and may actually help them understand what our constraints are relative to some of the other stuff we'd all love to do, and just, well, we still got to put gas in the buses and heat the buildings and those things. And, we do think about the student-teacher ratio, and this is where we're at, and try to make sure that the information's out there and it's not just all rumor and innuendo relative to that. So, we can, at the budget subcommittee level, we've already had one meeting, and as we do that, we'll plot those out and get some content in there and put them on the agenda and present those, okay? The other thing that we have to talk about is we have a joint meeting on Monday night with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to be out of town, I will not be there. This is their meeting, they called it, we're there to attend. We need to have representation there. As many of us that can be there should be there. Do we know where we are on the agenda on that?
7:15, I believe.
Okay, so we're pretty early into the meeting, 7:15, room 103 at the town hall. I think it's just a kickoff type thing. I don't think there's a huge expectation, but let's make sure we're there and listen, and we'll talk about what transpires. I think we should do it as a board. I mean, that's kind of the way we're invited. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were we invited as a board?
Yes, it's a joint meeting, it's been posted.
Yeah.
And, I think it would be good that we have as much representation as possible for that evening. If you recall last year, the town had very quickly put a placeholder in for the school department. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen at that meeting or not, but I think we need to really send a message that we're developing our budget, and we will be giving you a number sooner than later, but we don't have a number now, so please don't assume that number has any meaning.
So is this a process meeting? Is this outlining the expectations?
I would assume that it is. It's a sort of a preliminary kickoff type thing to the whole town-wide budget process.
We should be getting some materials tomorrow afternoon from the town, and I'll send them out as soon as I receive them. From there.
I had one more thing on the budget. We had also discussed at the summer retreat adding a budget process description on the website that's general enough to allow us leeway, but also an explanation that's good enough so that if someone isn't involved or wants to become more involved or just forgets how something happened last year, they can reference and say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it also lets them know how, when they're ready to plug in or if they want to plug into the conversation, that this is the way to do it. I drafted something and we worked on it a little bit at the budget subcommittee meeting that we had last week. I can read it, or we can send it around and we can put it up, whatever.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we put it on the agenda for next time, and let's all get with it? And but what I would like to do is, if you have comments, give them to Alex prior to that, well prior, please, as prior as you can, with the idea that if we can, then we can talk about it and hopefully finalize it. I think it is a good idea. I think it's worthwhile. And we just got to, dot the i's and cross the t's with it. So let's do that, and we can try to finalize that at the next meeting.
Excellent.
And while we're talking about the agenda, can we put a master plan steering committee update on the next agenda as well? Sure. I will do that. I forgot to put it on tonight. I was going to do it tonight. I didn't, so which is fine. All right, anything else on the budget at the moment? Okay. Next, under old business, is school committee goal setting, and we're going to have a general discussion on that.
And I just wanted to put it as a placeholder. I know it's 20 to 9. I didn't expect a robust discussion tonight. I just wanted it on your minds. We need to figure out the most efficient way to do this. We can, hash it out in public session. Sometimes it's nice to have some ideas down prior to doing that. If possible, I'd really like the strategic goals aligned to Vision 2020, and just the standards. You don't have to go, beyond the standards, but it would just tie into everything else that we're doing in our district, and everything aligns to the strategic plan. We had a good discussion on goals at our retreat, and part of the realization was we, as a school committee, you really need to develop goals that have meaning to you and help you move in a direction that you feel you need to. Sometimes you get caught up in the weeds and you're trying to do goals similar to what the principals would do or what I would do, and that's fine, but your function is a little differently. We function as a team, but I want to make sure you have that flexibility to really brainstorm and talk about or venture into areas that are really important to you as a school committee as we move forward. So formatting, we've used a variety of formats, whatever makes sense.
Can we get a couple, do we have prior years?
Yes.
Goals that we can get sent out? And,
they're in the retreat package, but I will send them out again.
Well, or we can pull them up from there. Okay.
I know that MASC sometimes offers support for school committees on this issue, and that some school districts also do this. Either they'll do it before their meeting or after their general meeting. If we could do maybe at 6:30, or maybe we just want to include it in the regular agenda, but we have options in terms of the way to time it without having to schedule a whole separate meeting for the one issue. We could either do it before, like we often do for our hearings, or we could do it towards the end, so we can send the administrators home if they feel they need to leave. But we have options in terms of how we want to approach it.
We actually brought MASC in 4 years ago for a goal setting. So.
Yeah, no, we've taken a crack at the last couple of years. The goals have evolved a little bit. I think personally the one that, I'd like this, except I just don't have the right positioning to do it, is revitalizing the student representation here, and how we make, I guess, what is the meaning of class president, class student council, and all of that as it relates to the civic side of interfacing with the school board that's representing, the students. I would like to see if we could try to make progress on that this year, just in terms of one topic that there. And then I think the rest of them, I think we've actually reduced them just to tactical things that are actually probably just drop off our previous set of goals things here in terms of how we're running our business and things like that. And maybe, as Kelly mentioned, maybe try to pick something else to focus on, sort of more of a district future state that we want to be at.
Yeah, I agree with what Daryl said, but I do think, back to our earlier discussion, you do have to decide if you want tactical or strategic goals.
Right.
Right, and you should have at least some that are more strategic.
Yep.
Quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2, that's the phrase.
If I may, I just wanted to add something for Daryl. Now that we're settled into the high school, what I'd like to do is get the student representative identified, hopefully by the end of next week. We can, by this, almost Friday, by next Friday, for the school committee. So, we usually have a student rep, so. And I'll work with
But I know Alex and Mike have had some different ideas also in different things there, and
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it should be a larger conversation, because I think it's, the fact that we have had such poor student representation is symptomatic of something else. Like, it's indicating that there's a larger opportunity than probably.
What's the matter
So it'd be less than.
the opportunity?
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean just the student representative. I mean, like, I think that if you had a lot more student involvement to begin with, it would naturally feed up the ranks to giving you somebody who was, like, more interested in the position. So it shouldn't, in my mind, we should have a larger conversation about it, because it probably shouldn't be a recruitment thing, and in an ideal world, it would be the type of thing where there's,
It'll be an election.
it's, exactly.
Well,
And
it's
so-
required to be an election.
Right, so
True.
there'll be five, usually there's, by statute, there's a number of students who are supposed to meet with the school committee at certain
yeah.
times per year.
I
And
think
then
both.
of that group, there's one who serves on the
Yeah.
board.
So to me, I think I'm concerned with the fact that it's such an important and, that's such an important position, that the fact that we don't have so much more interest in it concerns me. So I think we should have a conversation about that.
And perhaps consider building in 2 or 3 meetings a year with the student council.
Yes.
Something I've talked about before in the past. If you want to engage our student body, I think having those face-to-face meetings are so important. And we could meet with them at 6:30 or something, and start that conversation.
Also wouldn't hurt us to sometimes go down to their turf.
Sure.
Yes, the interest
As a
is there. I
representative.
think actually visiting the school would be
Yeah.
easier for the kids after a practice, maybe make it a little earlier. I don't know if it has to be on a school committee night, it could be scheduled separate.
Arrange it, yeah.
Make it convenient for the students, like, before they have so much in the evening that occupies their time, but I would say roughly sometime between 5 and 6. So I would certainly talk to the students. I'd like to be active in broadcasting this message to the student body, because the interest is there. There are a number of students who would be happy to meet with the school committee and express their concerns or interest in politics or any of the issues involving the town
Yeah.
on a regular basis.
I'd like us to sort of look prospectively as to our agenda items and give students a month in advance. Like the
Excellent.
perfect one would be this dress code issue. Like, let's tell them, once they're elected, let's tell them now that we're going to look to meet with them, talk about that, talk about, try and come up with as many things as possible, give that to them in advance. And I'd like to sit down and actually have them.
Yeah. You definitely have
Give.
2 automatically in attendance.
Yeah, well, that's why I said pick those. I'm trying to look at the.
Yeah, it's nice when we have, regardless of how I feel about the issue, it's nice when we have that feedback at the policy level, because for the last, at least since when I was in high school, so beginning in 2009.
Way back.
Way back.
Yeah, all the way back to 2009. You've been here for how long?
Longer than you've been out of school.
Yeah, I know. But the student role has very often been one that updates us about events going on in the schools and how the sports teams are doing. And that's all important information. But the whole purpose of the student representative is to speak for and give us that perspective, and that's valuable. I think what we heard tonight is valuable, because I don't think many of us would see the dress code and say, oh, there might be an issue here. But hearing that different perspective helps.
All right, let's do this. That's great, Darryl bringing that up specifically, and Kelly talked about it. Let's, not next meeting, but the meeting after, let's think about doing a 6:30 goal setting, but prior to that, we need to get some stuff down so that we have something to talk about. I don't want us coming off the ground with nothing to talk about. So if we can just facilitate that and make that happen, we'll do that in 2 meetings and do that early. I'd rather do it early than after.
Alex, suggestion as secretary, why don't you start a Google Doc that everybody can access, and put ideas down, and you'll have the format.
And when you do that, why don't you go grab the stuff that we have had the last couple of years and just fire it right in there, we'll just go off of that. And also, please make sure you get Daryl's concerns in there about the student representation factor.
Right, that way you can add ideas, and then when we have that meeting, we're going to have something to look at.
Do we want to involve MASC at any point?
Let's hold off and see if we feel like we need to. I think we'll be okay.
I think we should be okay.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Anything else on that one? No. All right. Park and Recreation memorandum of understanding relative to van use.
I just wanted to keep you up to date on what we've done. Park and Rec and I have been talking about van usage for about 4 or 5 months, and we had a change in leadership with Park and Rec. And I'd just like to start by making the comment, very, very pleased that we can sit down with any entity within our town and work towards common goals and keep what's best for our children in mind as we're moving forward. So I feel good about the agreement that we struck. I remember 4 years ago, or 4.5 years ago now, when I first came here, we had a Park and Rec agreement that was unable to be ratified for a long, long time, and we were able to hammer that out and move forward. And this was just a true indication of how far we've come. Within a week and a half, with new leadership, we had an agreement. And it's a little lengthy, but that's fine. I mean, it's their van, and they wanted to keep it. And I appreciate where they're coming from. Very fair, and it allows us access to use a vehicle that's going to help with some programming and help transport students to various areas of town. And with our smaller athletic teams, golf, for example.
Had it today.
Yeah, golf. I use the van today to transport students. So there should be some cost savings. We're going to track that as the year goes on to see what kinds of savings we've incurred. And please understand, this wasn't about cost savings. This was about providing programming for our students. So that was where I was coming from. So again, thanks to the Park and Rec Board for working with us. Greatly appreciated.
All right, and the last item under old business is the superintendent contract amendment. And we had our superintendent evaluation that we did, at the end of the spring, last couple meetings of
It was June.
Last June. June. And then we did have a executive session with the superintendent to talk over the addendum, which is a very simple 3% salary increase from $147,263 to $151,681 effective July 1st, 2015. Kelly's contract runs from July 1 to June 30, year by year. Comments? Darryl, why don't you start? You kind of drive the whole evaluation process, which is a sort of a outcome of.
Yeah, no, I think the evaluation was very positive, almost exceptional in many of the categories there. And then, and I think this sounds like a very reasonable increase, particularly given also where the superintendent's net salary sits also there. So.
Mark, you didn't really get a chance to participate in this one.
No, I wasn't involved, but it sounds reasonable to me and seems to be with the going rate around the town.
Okay. Alex?
I think it's reasonable. It's a unanimous vote. I think it's a good decision. And I also want to point out that even though relative to many other superintendents in the area, sometimes we fall a little bit behind, Kelly's proposal was in line with, it did not exceed what a lot of other folks in the district were getting, which I thought was indicative of a mindset that, we don't want a superintendent who thinks it's all about them. They look at the whole district, they look at the administrators, they look at the teachers, they look at the non-union employees and see, well, is everyone else, able to get some increase as well? And looking at that and having that conversation, I think was very valuable. So thank you.
Yes, Kelly obviously got stellar reviews in his performance evaluation, so it's a totally reasonable adjustment.
I agree. It was a good process. It was a good instrument. It's a different instrument than we've used in past years, but it aligns with the educator evaluation system and staff evaluation system that we're implementing across the board. It was very positive. And I think that the whole process and this outcome is reflective of how we regard him and Alex did a nice job of how he regards his role in the district. It's good to keep you happy. We're happy to have you. We appreciate the year-by-year leadership that we get out of you and the continuity. That helps the district quite a bit, so perfectly good with this. Is it really 6 copies? We got to sign this 6 times?
4 would be fine.
4 would be fine.
4 would be fine.
All right, it does require a motion, so if I can get a motion.
Make a motion to accept the modification of the superintendent's contract for representing a 3% increase effective June 30th, 2015.
Effective July 1st.
July 1st, sorry, July 1st, 2015.
Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, I'm going to sign this, and then we'll pass it along and keep signing it as we go. But as we do that, we now are into the superintendent's report.
Thank you. First item on the agenda under my report, your personnel update, action-packed update. One correction I'd like to make, though, that came to my attention when I looked at it again, is Lily Fennebecker. She was not on a sabbatical. She was on a leave of absence. And there's a real pronounced difference between those two things. So Lily was on a leave of absence, and I'll have the business office change that. Any questions on some of the changes we had? We had some people moving around the district this year, which is really good to have people wanting to do new things, teach new subjects or different classrooms, etc. I find that to be very revitalizing for staff. And if there are no questions, I'll move on to the next agenda.
I just have
Yep.
2 quick points. First, that we lost some great teachers who were retiring, which is always a little sad to see them go. But certainly grateful for the time they spent here. And then a question about the special ed staff. And perhaps this is because we don't interact with them as much as we might the regular education teachers. Is this level of turnover about normal? Is it maybe a little high? Is it a little low?
It's about normal. You have to remember that we're very fortunate. A number of our ed assistants come to us with very impressive qualifications, and a number of them are trying to get experience to get into the field, get into the classroom, or get a consultant's position, etc. So it's a stepping stone for them.
So it's a high turnover.
Yeah,
role
it's a process.
by definition,
And the way I look at it, if we have the opportunity to help somebody grow and become better, and they secure a better job, we should be proud of that. We are. So it just is an indicator that we hire quality people, and they get some training, and they move on to do what they've set out to do in the beginning.
Excellent. Thank you. Rita, I wanted you to get some airtime tonight, that's all.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Rita.
No, that's not one.
School startup, as I've already said, we had an excellent start to the school year. It was seamless. Some of you were probably anxious about enrollment. As I said earlier, we're up 37 students, and they were dispersed throughout the various grades, so they didn't all land in 1 or 2 grades, but certainly helped us. And I included an enrollment summary sheet in your package. Our absenteeism rate during the first 2 days of school was negligible. Most of our kids were there, and I was very pleased with that. And I was thinking about that, and I think we always have to remember that a lot of our kids in middle school and high school have already begun the routine prior to that week. They've started practicing for athletics, etc. So whenever you do something different in terms of start date, you always wonder about attendance, especially when you start prior to a long weekend. And we hardly, I'd say system-wide, we had under 20 students absent, out of 16, 37, so that's impressive.
It'll be higher when there's the next cold going around.
Probably.
Yeah.
So I wanted to report that to you.
Can I just jump one thing?
Sure.
Just as the discussion earlier about the sports fees in Bromfield maybe having to, because we get too many participating, that we won't be able to do a co-op anymore. As our number of students bumps up like this, the ability for us to accept school choice in becomes severely limited, which is also a significant source of funding. There it might be something we try to figure out how to present a coherent discussion to the community of what the ramifications that might be if we have to cut school choice slots there, the revenue impacts of that there. I don't know exactly how to capture it, but in the back of my mind, it's concerning to me. As I just watched you know, how many kids were getting on the bus across from my my house this morning.
Well, no, I mean, it would be simple enough to do an analysis of, you know, where we are in the distribution of school choice students and what the age out, you know, is going to be year by year, and thinking about, you know, what would be the impact if we replaced it 0%, 50%, 75%. You know, we can definitely do that. It's probably not a bad idea as part of our budget process to think about that.
Take a look at
Because
that.
it is, it's a revenue stream that
We're
have
dependent
used.
on.
Yeah, we're depending on it.
And you need to, and I know you do realize this, but we give you a lot of information.
Yep.
During the last 3 years, we've already started that process. We're not taking very many students in beyond primary school. So a number of our school choice students enter at kindergarten or grade 1, but as you go up from there, our numbers diminish. In fact, by the time you hit middle school, grade 7, we weren't taking anybody, and then we had a smaller class in high school, so we took a couple of kids in there. So we're already making those adjustments, but you're right. In the long run, with what we're seeing in town for potential construction, that revenue stream will be affected. And you have to remember that for a resident student, we're only funded around 22% of the cost of educating that student from the state. The rest comes from local taxation. So it wouldn't be a straight exchange, so to speak.
No,
in terms of
I don't
money.
think our Chapter 70 goes up as much as if we lose some of those school choice ones, which will, from the town side, has a major impact on the budget projections.
Right.
There.
So that's a good point. We need to keep that at the forefront of our discussions. District brochure, that's draft form. We still need to do a few more edits and spruce it up a bit. I'm to the point now where it's ready to go next week, and I did some pricing and looked at the size of the brochure, and I don't want to cut it down anymore. I think too much would be lost from it. If we were to mail it home, have it printed, I found a printer that was actually half the cost of some other printers we looked at. $3,200 to print, about $700 to mail to everybody, so a little over $4,000. I'm not convinced. I know that's a pretty reasonable price, but I'm still not convinced that's what I would like to do. Or I don't think that's my recommendation tonight. You know, $4,000 could still do a lot of other things besides mail paper home. So what I'd like to do, and what I'm proposing, is I'd like to email it out to our school community. I'm going to talk to LCTV, see if they can't make some templates to put it on the LCTV channel. I'll run some copies off, and we'll place them strategically throughout town. Some of the restaurants, perhaps, realtors, town offices, some other businesses that have high traffic areas, and at the schools, of course. And we'll try that and see how successful we are at reaching the broader community.
The other thing that I would like to do is possibly have some available at fall town meeting.
We can do that.
You know, there's a lot of that type of stuff, and people kind of grab it as they go. I'm not thinking necessarily that we need to have one for every person that attends, but if we had some there.
And we'll put it on our website, of course.
You know how you have the little brochures that you have now on bullying and a few of those. Having them available like that, I think, for if somebody is stopping by your office and picks it up and reads it,
that's good.
Type of thing there. Council on Aging might be another one to drop
That's
a
a
few
great
copies
idea.
off.
I had that on my list. Good, thank you. Yeah.
There too, you know, because I think it's an important constituency within town.
And I think that would be a better way to do it. It's not going to really cost us very much money, and you know, sometimes the right people get it, they start talking about it, and then before you know it, more people are picking those
Offer the
brochures
PDFs
up.
to the real estate agents, because they'll probably see a lot of people looking at houses that
Right.
in the town and have questions about the schools.
Exactly.
They can print it themselves to hand up to their customers.
We did add a table on student classroom sizes, pre-K to 9, and I also modified an enrollment table to show school enrollments as well. So we did make a couple of changes since last time.
Okay.
The only thing I might add is we talk a lot about our strategic goals and what we want to be doing next. And that's, I think, present throughout the brochure in some pieces, but just maybe a short goals section might be a good place to let people know not just where we are, which I think is a good place, but where we're going, which is, I think, an opportunity to show off a little bit about all the strategic planning that the administration has been doing.
You know, it's always tough to know when to stop, and we're already at 18 pages, so I'll think about it, but I also realize that if you push the envelope, it's not going to help. It's going to hinder the process. When we first started, our goal was 9 pages, and no matter how hard I tried to whittle it down, I just couldn't without losing some value. So, Alex, I'm going to give that some thought as we move forward. We'll get this one out, but I'll think about it on the weekend as well, because I couldn't do that in less than a page. And I don't think the page would give it justice. But let me give that some thought. And you may have some ideas, too, for that.
Connect offline.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
And my college options in your package. It was interesting when I looked at this. I look at it every year, but one area caught my attention, and I've asked Principal Harrington to start surveying our students internally so that we can do a data check, I call it, because that's important. But, impressive numbers. 31.2% of our students that graduated this past year are pursuing careers in science, technology, engineering, or math. 94% intend to attend a 4-year institution, which is really high. 94%.
That's national data.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to make sure and clarify. I got a chance to look at it later this afternoon.
Oh, they tricked us. They tricked me this year.
They're citing data, and we would have, but it's prompted discussion for us to look at that data.
All right, thanks.
Just wanted to add that.
Principal Harrington. This is the first year they've done that. Usually they've just given us Littleton data, and now they changed it. Because the one I was looking at is the 33.3% will be the first in their families to attend college. And I said to Principal Harrington today when I phoned him, I said, I don't think that's accurate for this community. And you didn't clue in at that time either. So thank you for pointing that out. But these are things that we need to track as a district. And we've talked about good statistics to have to share with our public. And I think those 3 categories are very important as we move forward. They also mention in the package, they're talking about individual planning for students. And Principal Harrington this year, as part of the NEASC suggestions or recommendation, will be initiating school-based student planning portfolios. And I'm anxious to get this underway because I've been a firm believer in portfolio creation for students in high school and perhaps even middle school. But we're going to focus on the high school for now. But I think it helps them in terms of thinking about what they want to do and what colleges or people that are in the careers that they want to do have done to be successful. So that's an exciting addition to this year. Case agreement, rather long. I gave you the last one that was signed in 2005. That agreement that you see before you this evening has been at the DSE, ESC, back to case lawyers, back and forth. That's the addition, so to speak, that we're ready to sign. I don't know if you realize this. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of CASE, so I will be at the helm for the next 2 years, so to speak. And I'm really excited about that. CASE offers great programs to students throughout the region. Over 25,000 students in the region when you think about it. Not CASE students, but that's the area that it encompasses. And there's nothing in there in the contract that I would caution you. I like the way it was presented because they told you where the changes were and gave you reasons as to why there was a change. Just so you know, as just a tidbit of information, we are about to sign a proposal to do a study on the CASE Collaborative and surrounding collaboratives to see if we can develop some efficiencies with shared services or shared programming, and let you know how that goes as time goes on. Any questions about the document?
Do you need a motion on that?
Yes, and a signature.
I make a motion to accept the case agreement.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Going to a case, I think I've been to one or two, maybe 2 case meetings before, and I learned a lot. So if you get the chance,
good.
go, because they're pretty interesting. Very,
Excellent.
very different, I think, from what we're comfortable with here, because it's just a completely different system.
CPR Smart School application, Principal Harrington talked to me about this summer. What Principal Harrington's proposing is obviously we jump on board and become a CPR Smart School. He's also asking for a change in our graduation requirement and have it mandated that students be trained in CPR prior to graduation. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. Our current seniors have already been trained, so the recommendation would be to change policy and put it into effect for the current school year. So that would be something that would most likely go to Daryl, if Daryl's still willing to do that at this point in time. And it would just be a minor change, and we can have it tweaked and send it to you if the committee is prepared to move in that direction.
Any thoughts on that?
I think it's great. And I think that we do give the high school principal the leeway to waive the requirement if someone, maybe if they have a physical handicap or has some sort of issue. I think that's great. Does the requirement require that they be certified or just that they've had the training?
I believe it's for the training. And
Okay.
I met with the fire department, and this is made possible because of our collaboration with the LFD. They actively are supporting this as well, so it's a true partnership. It really wouldn't have been possible without the fire department's instructors providing instruction. And we did need a general provision in there, you're right, Alex, to say that there's all kinds of special circumstances. They wanted it to be generic, recommended language from the Heart Association was for physical handicaps or things like that might interfere with someone's ability to perform CPR. But sometimes I just know that there's a wide variety of reasons that could come up where we need the discretion to waive graduation requirements as principals. And so I've made sure to put that under special circumstances. It covers all kinds of situations. A given year where there might be a financial issue with the grant from the fire department to provide the necessary instructors in time for graduation. If we already exceed the expectation for the requirement, the requirement is that somewhere in high school they're trained, but by graduation, to get the CPR Smart School designation from the American Heart Association. We do it twice. We do it in sophomore year and in senior year. And so we've already been doing this. We don't have it on the books as a requirement. And we haven't been checking to see if all students satisfied or if they were all in attendance on that day. I also asked the fire department this past week, what about a circumstance where a kid was not in attendance for illness over an extended period of time? Could we provide some type of special instruction? And they said they'd be happy to provide an instructor come over for a small segment of kids who might need it just in time for graduation.
Fantastic. And then my other question would be, students who are out of district placements or receiving services out of the district, do they still graduate with a Littleton diploma? Do they graduate with our graduation requirements or with the graduation requirements of wherever we end
We
up
recognize the
service?
facility they're at, and if it's under the guise of an IEP, they often have the world language requirement waived. They might not always take 4 years of math, so they receive a high school diploma based on
and that could be one of those special circumstances that they would be covered
based on
under
the
that.
school they're at, and as long as they're pursuing an individualized education plan that is supported programmatically or approved of by this district, then we grant them a high school diploma.
Excellent. Thank you.
We had no strong feelings. I think it sounds like a great idea.
So I'm kind of a little mixed on this one here. As when I'm doing safety, I think it's, us getting it integrated into the program there is good. I did have some concerns about as we make it a mandatory requirement and make sure I understand what's the benefits of us making it a mandatory requirement here in terms of versus our voluntary program that we have now, and what's the impetus behind that?
I'm always leery of mandates, especially when it becomes it could become an imposition for us to manage as well as to have the students. So, geez, another thing to check off the list to graduate from high school. people are projecting them, maybe it'll be 4 years of science in the future for students to graduate from high school, and that there's a cost to that. Right now, we have a 3-year requirement for science. So I share how leery you are around mandates. At the same time, we are proposing this language with the provision for me to make waivers and provide waivers to give, because it's mandated to be recognized by the American Heart Association for the CPR Smart School designation. There needs to be a policy. That's the driver behind it. If we were doing it anyway, we didn't have a policy for it.
And then what does the American Heart Association Smart School designation do for us?
It's not really, I think we're recognized for, we get, the job, there's some positive public relations related to it. But in terms of, there's no funding that comes from it. It's really strongly a public relations piece, as well as the pluses of just having students trained in CPR. It's a public recognition of work we're already doing with the support of the American Heart Association.
Are we a heart healthy community? Because I see that in some signs in some towns.
That's come up too, and we are.
I'm just trying to understand coupling of the efforts there.
Right.
And then my final part there is, since it's kind of a little bit more discretionary than some of the other policy changes we've done for graduation requirements there, that I'm almost wondering if we want to have a public input session just to make sure that the community at large has input on this before we make it a graduation requirement on that.
There's only 2 other schools in the state right now that have this designation, so we definitely would be leading the way in this. In the packet is why take this step from. You probably had a chance to read that. It's visibility in the school community. It's they said establishing platforms for students to have a work, but it's really a life skill, I think, a work-ready skill, and enhance their awareness of volunteer community service. We already do an active job with that. And then they have a plug in here that demonstrates the Massachusetts legislature the value the schools place on school community partnerships and investment. It's from the CPR Smart School program. It's really a public relations outreach on the American Heart Association to promote heart health and public safety. And so we, by receiving this designation or applying for it, our application wouldn't be accepted. We wouldn't be recognized unless we have a policy on the books. So that's why we're here tonight before you asking for this. I think we put a safety mechanism in the language of the policy to say that I can waive it under special circumstances. The one I was most concerned about is not necessarily a limitation of an individual student as much as the fiscal reality, of trying to fund a mandated requirement. What if there was a difficult budget year and the partnership was not, the training, we didn't have funding for the instructors, and something had to go in the budget, what would we do? Well, we'd have to be able to waive it. We'd have to have the flexibility as an administration to waive this requirement. So that's why I put that provision in there, where that doesn't necessarily, and that's in there actually under all graduation requirements. This is in our language, with this special language for me to, the kid gets into a difficult situation where I have discretion to review it and waive it.
Philosophically, I don't have a problem with the waiving it on the individual basis there for a student that may have difficulty achieving that requirement or circumstances prevent them. When it has a budget implication that we would have to waive it because we didn't have budget means that we're not supporting it. It's not supported properly through the system. And if it's something that would give if we didn't have funding, is it really a graduation requirement?
It's a hypothetical. I
know.
I don't know what the answer would be until we arrive at that case. I just wanted some provision in there to protect us as a school.
But I'm just concerned that if the fire department doesn't have the grants that is enabling them to help us,
that's right.
We don't have budget money to fund this new graduation requirement.
Would agree to spend, that's for sure.
No, that's what I mean. That's where I'm a little torn on putting it in as a graduation requirement right now, and I'd also like to make sure we got community input before making that decision.
I respect that and understand.
I was going to bring up the budgetary concern. My other concern is if you're only doing this as part of a 9th grade or 10th grade class, right? What do you do with people that move in late to the district, and how are you offering it to them that they now have this graduation requirement that
Right.
they can't necessarily satisfy.
It's a standalone training, and it's provided in 10th grade and again in 12th grade. So the students have two opportunities to learn it. We are doing it already on a volunteer basis, although we have pretty high participation rates. Students don't opt out of it. We schedule students to go down and be trained at a specific time by the fire department in 10th and now 12th grade. So we are doing it already. We don't check for it, though, as a requirement. We have a graduation checklist, and before I'm able to issue a diploma, I have to certify that all students have met the requirements, and I'm not checking for this one right now. This one, though, would be added to the checklist for our guidance counselors and administrators in the building to check that students have passed this before. Similar to community service, we have a 50-hour community service requirement. And so that's what the move would be, another check for us. It certainly, we have plenty to do, but it certainly seemed like a really positive initiative, and I was happy to support it when I learned about it. But there, you'd have to weigh the value of it. There are fiscal realities that set in, and that's what I talked to the American Heart Association about. There's possibilities there, but that's all hypothetical. If we were in a situation where the fire department instructors were not able to come in, we would appeal to the American Heart Association. Would they provide it? I don't know.
Let me shed a little more light on this. This is a decision really, is do you want the accolades for doing this or not? There's a practical side here. A number of years ago when I was a principal, I made it a requirement. It was site-based management, so I had a lot of latitude. And before I would hire a staff member, they had to be CPR certified. That's what I wanted as a principal because I believed it would make a difference. And lo and behold, during my time as a principal, we had a little boy who stopped breathing on us, and if I wouldn't have had trained staff out on the playground, that little boy would no longer be here. The staff saved his life. So we can talk about budget and money, but the reality is, and this is only my perspective, we have a responsibility to have our staff, our students, be as well-trained as they possibly can be and be good citizens. And the more people you have walking out on the street that have that basic training, the greater chance that somebody is going to survive that otherwise wouldn't survive. So I think we need to put it in that context. I know we always struggle with money, but sometimes we have to look at that greater common good. And I wish everybody over the age of 15 was certified, to be quite honest with you, especially after having that experience.
I know it's required for babysitting, pretty much,
Right.
pretty much, as we do have our staff currently trained. I don't know, is it at all buildings now, all the staff, but it's at the high
No.
school, we have trained all our staff in CPR and AED, and they do receive the basic heart certification card for that. We were walking by AEDs everywhere in public institutions, throughout all the high school, throughout our buildings, in public facilities. And it's nice to know that if you're walking by them as a citizen in the future, I'm thinking of a 16-year-old today walking by, 5 years. Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but I've seen that device. I've seen it in place. I've been trained in it. I've gained an awareness at least about it. A lot of people walking by these devices don't have a clue how to use them. So that's, there is the public good piece, and I would certainly echo what the sentiments of the superintendent.
I think we all support the idea, and I think it's great that really we're doing all of that. And nobody's arguing that we're not doing that. As a matter of fact, you hit it on the nail, Dr. Herron. You said we do it twice. We're twice as good as anybody else is pretty much already doing it. I agree there. I have the exact same concerns that you have. So I think what we should do is just go ahead and let's go through the process we would normally go through. And we can get some public input on it. We can consider it some more ourselves and have some more debate about it. And then we can decide what the best course of action is and what the right wording is if we decide to go ahead and do it. Okay?
And lastly, I'd just say that the American Heart Association has offered to send a representative to speak in front of you to advocate for it.
So I'll put that, if it's all right, on their second meeting in October for a public hearing. Does that work?
Yeah. And, and that might be a good time for the American Heart Association representative to come talk to the people about the value of having this. And again, I don't question the value of the training. My concern is making it a requirement.
That's what I was worried about when I put in that brief.
And I think that will be important for us to make sure we articulate to the public.
Why, right. Bolster our point of view, whatever it may turn out to be.
And when we do have that hearing, I don't need an answer now, I think we're ready to move on, but when we have that hearing, I'd be interested to know if that funding were to dry up, would we be able to offer that as part of our regular health or physical education classes?
How much it would cost to do independent?
Whether that's in the class, what would other options be?
The option, the first thing keep in mind would be volunteer, having volunteers in the community who are trained to come in at no cost. I bet you we could get up a good amount, but it's hypothetical.
If we had to pay for it, it'd probably be, for one class, 13,000.
One class of
Well,
students,
120,
graduate
130 students.
Yeah, I'm not obsessing over the cost. It's
So
a
I just-
matter of just philosophically how we make sure that it's structurally supported by our system.
Okay. All right, we're good on that. Rick, anything else on the superintendent's report?
Nope, that's it, thank you.
Interested citizens?
I actually have one thought that I should have brought up over a new business.
Go ahead.
Just because it's the start of the school year, and last year and the year before, we were talking a lot about both the school calendar and school start times. We did some work on the school calendar last year, school start times we didn't touch. Because it's the beginning of the school year, I thought it might be a good idea for us to start addressing it now, when we have a lot of lead time before we have to make those decisions. And I also think that when it comes to working out different possibilities, different solutions, being able to take an approach from a working group perspective might be a more effective way to come up with some options and then present those options to the group, to the school committee in an open meeting, but to have those options there. And also to have more flexibility to meet with different stakeholders, whether that's the transportation director, whether that's the superintendent, the PTA, whatever that might be.
I have no problem with us talking about it. I think you're right. If we're going to talk about it, we got to start, because, it's not something we can be making determinations on in April and May. I see two sides of it. One is the operational side and what different possibilities would mean operationally. And I think that's something that our admin team has to deal with. They're the pros from Dover. They're the ones who know how the district works day in and day out from the ground level. And we need that input, but I don't necessarily think that we're going to bring anything by virtue of sitting down with them and helping them understand it, or helping them tell us what we want to know. They'll figure that out. I have no problem. Obviously, this will be something that does engender a tremendous amount of public input. Whether we do it out of a working group format or we do it from public hearing formats prior to our general business on a given night, or both, that's fine too. I do like the idea that you have of sometimes it's easier to have the discussion if we've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 possibilities rather than just opening it up to a Pandora's box of, whether we do 3 shifts a day at school and we can do all kinds of things. So, I don't know, what's your point of view from the superintendent?
We have to be cautious and identify what we can actually do. If starting before Labor Day is, or depending on the calendar year, starting before Labor Day is important to you as a school committee and the community, I'll tell you right now.
Well, hold on. I think you're talking about start of the day, right?
I'm talking about both.
Okay.
Because
Sorry, I thought I heard you
that's
say
fine.
specifically talking about.
Or
start
rather, I'm not
times.
even talking about both. I'm talking about both.
Okay.
We would have to, in order to do this the right way, we would have to ask the LEA to open up their contract, because it's a contractual obligation that we have right now to not start before September 1st. As soon as you open up a contract, you can't just open up one clause, you have to open up the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time this school committee, for many, many, many years, hasn't been negotiating a contract every year, which is really tough on a culture. And I've seen some great growth as a result of solidifying a contract and not having to hammer it out all the time. So you have to ask yourself that question. Is it the right time? Can we wait until we open up the contract and make that a priority in terms of negotiating? Teachers...
we're late enough, and there's enough to chew on this. I'd rather put this on an agenda, and let's do it right.
Okay.
And we can talk more about your ideas about process and ideas about all that other stuff. Otherwise, we could easily talk about this for another half an hour without any trouble, all for the right reasons. But I'd rather than feel rushed, I'd rather, but your point, Alex, that if we're going to do it, let's go going, is perfectly valid, and let's do that. Let's get it on an agenda and, start thinking about the best way to do it. And the only thing that I would say is I see the calendar as one thing and the start times as another. If we try to do them both together, we'll never get there. We'll never get anything done. We need to think about it as two separate things, and it may very well, one may take precedent over another, or there may be a process for one that is entirely different from the process for the other, for whatever reasons. So let's just think about that as we go forward with it. But we can definitely consider both.
Would you like me to put that on the next agenda? Or?
How's the next agenda looking? I have no problem putting it on the
Getting
next
heavier
agenda.
every minute.
That's right, we already put a couple things too away. What?
I want to. There's a comment that I have been wanting to
No,
make,
you
and
were just-
I'm going to make it right now because it seems like it's appropriate, germane to the conversation. I think we need, as a school committee, to have a conversation about our meetings and the way that our agendas are written, because I don't want to sound like a fly in anyone's ear, but I really think I think we really need to concentrate on having agendas that are important. Everything we talk about is important, and make sure that we boil it down to what's important. But we really need to have accurate times on our agendas that we're sticking to, because I think it's unfair to a lot of people, including our administrators and guests, that I haven't been here for a single meeting that has gotten out on time. And I think everyone is okay with staying late, but if we're going to be staying until 10 o'clock, it should be reflected in the agenda. And it seems like every time I open the agenda and I look at it and I say, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. And that's not a problem. I mean, it's our responsibility to be here as long as it takes. But I just want to ask, moving forward with these heavy agenda items that we're talking about, I would really appreciate, at least for myself, that we get the times in there, leave in some room, because I feel like Alex probably did right then, that if you do have an issue that comes up that you want to talk about, every time when we're looking at being 10, 15, 20 minutes past the schedule, it feels like you're adding to a burden that we're adding to. So I just want to, I think we're all comfortable staying until 9:45 as long as it's reflected, because people are budgeting their calendars and things like that.
And really what we should be doing is, if we get done early, that's fine.
Exactly.
Because there's very few things on the agenda where somebody says, hey, you told me you were starting at 8:25, and you did it at 8:15, and I didn't get a chance to chime in.
There's nothing better than thinking you're going to be here until 10 o'clock and getting out at 9:15.
Right.
So it's just a request. I don't want to be like
I guess another suggestion, when I had larger school committees to deal with, we stuck to the agenda.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
if we allot 20 minutes, 20 minutes is up, unless the school committee
As
wants
long
to
as,
spend-
as long as,
and put it on the
and as
next
long as what's
agenda.
put in the agenda is
Okay.
is a feasible thing.
I can do that too, but we can do that. We'll take a better look at the spacing,
you bet.
and we can do a little bit better job.
And be creative with, the idea of doing a flipped agenda like you do in flipped classrooms, where maybe we watch that video, maybe we weren't, told that we should be watching that video ahead of time and just discussing it here in meetings, things like that. I think we should have a conversation about our meeting.
All right, so we're good.
Go Patriots.
If you can get on the next agenda, do it. If not, the next one after
Okay.
that. But we
Sounds
already had a
good.
couple things to it, but I'll leave that to
Okay.
you, and he and I will take a look at the agenda and the spacing of the agenda. Okay? All right, subcommittee reports, PMBC?
Yeah, I didn't bring candy for PMBC, so sorry.
Make it quick.
All right, so a lot of things going on with PMBC. So the high school roof, they have the bid received there. They're meeting with the contractor. I don't have the detailed schedule at this point, but it looks like the window is between the October 19th and November 6th for them to start and complete the repairs on the high
The
school
bid
roof.
opening is scheduled for September 30th. There's our
Bids
pre-bid
due 9:30.
walkthrough, I think the 23rd or something like that.
That the Shaker Lane parking lot's been awarded. They're waiting, they're just going to now negotiate with the contractor to start building the schedule out for that. The one item we brought up during that meeting is they're going to work weekends on that. So my recommendation would be is we close the grounds there, because they're going to be actually bringing the machines to rip up the heat, the tar, and reclaim the whole thing. So not only the school should be off limits, but the fields and back need to
I
be.
think there's a whole lot going on
There's
back
probably
in the
not.
fall.
We'll check with Park and Rec and
Right.
coordinate
I don't
with
think
Park and
soccer
Rec. to make
uses
sure.
it. I know football does
Yeah,
it. So
but I think we need to
that's a good
notify
point.
people so that,
Right.
I don't
Dog
think we want
walkers
people
and-
on the,
Right.
around that equipment while
Right.
they're trying
No,
to,
you're
they're gonna
right.
try to get it done quickly, there. Steve, I think, is gonna be in the loop on coordinating an estimate for the Shaker Lane sidewalks. The company offered to do estimates for free, on that, so they're gonna look at whether there's some short-term repairs that could be done there. On the track, we're awaiting the estimate and schedule from Cape and Islands for the poly edge and the warranty crack repair on it there. Quite frankly, they're busy doing all the other ones that they're finishing up for the summer, so warranty work isn't hit the top of their priority. That's my own opinion there. The high school crack sealing should be all done. Steve said the hot water heaters are done, and I think some of the univents are all done at this point.
Unit
also.
ventilators are done for this year. There's still more to go, but yes.
Yeah, so those projects are moving on pretty well. The other part that they're wrestling with is just the number of projects and the need to actually hire contract engineering to do the bids and bid specs and everything. They had been doing several of them themselves and falling behind, so they're getting a little bit more aggressive on just hiring those services out, and that's really sped up a lot of the different things. There's still a bunch of things going on. I'll be helping them with trying to just get their overall budgets tracking and status monitoring a little bit crisper, because there's so many projects going on. Trying to get a current picture of how complete everything is a little tough.
And both playgrounds are done. So the new playground at Shaker Lane and the new playground at Russell Street were both done this summer. I just thought I'd throw that in.
I'm gonna get over there and try them out.
Don't break anything.
Yeah, it's only 3 to 5, Mike, or something like that. So-
Darryl, I'm
I'll
gonna
take
keep
the
going.
equipment in
Policy,
there.
policy.
I haven't swung into the policy. I've been helping the PMBC there.
And which brings me to my point, I'm glad you said that. So Darryl now has PMBC and policy, and he has a couple other things. We need to get him out from underneath a couple of those other things. So what else? It's safety and security?
Safety and security and CPAC liaison.
CPAC liaison.
It's not that I don't like those jobs, it's just that,
No, you've taken two major
there's a-
chunks here, and fair is fair. So we don't have to make a determination on that tonight, but we will deal with that in the near term. Okay? And just everybody just be ready, okay? Budget subcommittee, we had a discussion about budget already, we're not going to go back over it. The only thing I will add is that we have set a tentative calendar that may change, but it's in place, and we will be meeting regularly, basically every 2 weeks as we go forward.
We will post that calendar as soon as I get feedback from you guys to review
All
it.
right, and that'll be on there, okay? Anything else? All right, we are not going to do an executive session tonight. We do have some minutes that we want to get out, but we'll do it on the night that the Patriots aren't playing. All right? Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, motion made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.